Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 57, Cannonier versus Imavov, also known as UFC Louisville. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing on this fine, sunny Sunday?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Like, obviously, I live in Houston. You live in Rhode Island. I'm just assuming it's sunny out there from the little bit of glow you've got going on. Clearly, a lot has happened since we talked about UFC 302 last night.
How about that line right there? You see that line?
Yeah.
How about my arms? It's like a lobster. I don't know if you can show. How about that?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you're burning on your way to freckling, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the UFC is headed back to Louisville. And
heading back? They've been there before?
I thought they'd been.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, they probably have.
Yeah,
they haven't been to Rhode Island yet. What the hell?
They might as well have taken this card to Rhode Island because there are no Kentucky fighters on the card, and I hesitate to speak for the MMA fans of Kentucky, let alone the fabled Kentucky Judo Federation. But if I'm being honest, I don't see a whole lot on this card that's going to get those guys to like look up from their KFC and their bourbon and shell out for a ticket. I mean, we get a lot of cards that are just another card. This one is pretty dire. Even by the standards of the 2024 UFC, they usually dress it up a little bit more when it's an ESPN, like a regular ESPN card. I think those days have gone, man. Like this card, it's got 14 fights on it. Like half of the main card, there are 6 fights on the main card. Half of the main card is fighters who are at or below 500 in the UFC. Like I don't even want to ask you who's closest to a title shot off a win here, because we'll be here trying to think for 15 minutes.
Oh, it's got to be Cannonier.
I mean, you're probably right, but whew, how close is he if he wins?
I think there's a lot of good prospects on the prelims, though. There's a lot of people I like on the prelims.
I can't wait to get to them then. Especially
some female fighters. You know, when you put a card at this point, you put a card inside an arena with a crowd, it feels special at that point. They've done really well to do that. You add in, the main event is top contenders in the Bo Nickel division. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm probably a little higher in this kind. I agree that there's no structure. Like there's not, after the main event there isn't like that like co-main event that makes a lot of sense, and then kind of the way down it feels like there's these new, I don't know, nerds candy that my kids, it's actually really delicious. Like a bunch of nerds get all like stuck together in one big glop, and I'm like, who came up with this? That's how this is. I feel like they just like took a bunch of these nerd candy, just throw them all together, and then remarketed this new candy idea.
That is an amazing metaphor for this card. So this isn't one of the toddler plastic toy soup cards. This one is the nerds cluster card.
Yeah, what is the nerds? I got to figure out this. This is sponsored by that.
Right. Yeah. Brought to you by Nerds Clusters.
Actually might be the name of it.
Maybe this will be one of those previews where talking about it makes me more excited for the card than I was going in. Like that'd be fun. Outside of the top fight, which fighter would you say you're most excited to see on this one?
Dude, they actually are called Nerds Gummy Clusters. That's a real name.
Nerds Gummy
Clusters. They're absolutely delicious. Which fighter am I most excited? You know what? He's undefeated and he's flying so under the radar. Daniel Marcos. He hasn't got any buzz on his run in the UFC, and no one's talking about him.
He really hasn't, and I think part of it is that actually I don't know what all it is, but I'm one of the ones who has been reluctant to kind of get on any kind of bandwagon for him. Maybe this is the fight where he finally proves me wrong, and I'm like, okay, this guy is legit. He's the real deal.
He's got a tough fight. He's got a tough fight.
He does have a tough fight, and he has a little bit of something to bounce back from. I mean, we'll get to that when we get to it. No sense in starting to preview some of these 14 fights before we even dig in. Any other general thoughts on this one before we start the prelims?
No, it's going to be a long night, though.
All right. First up at UFC Louisville is a strawweight matchup between Rayanne Amanda dos Santos and Puja Tomar. Dos Santos, the 28-year-old Brazilian, is 14-7 overall. She's 0-1 since joining the UFC as an alum of Season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series and as the outgoing Invicta Atomweight champ. She made her debut back in December at UFC Fight Night Song vs. Gutierrez, where she dropped a split decision to Talita Alencar. She is still looking for that first UFC win. She will try to get it on Saturday against the debuting Tomar. 30-year-old from India will make history by being the first woman from India to fight in the UFC as soon as she steps into the cage. She's 8-4 overall. She is the outgoing Matrix Fight Night strawweight champ. She last defended that title last July against Anastasia Fyodorovna.
Nice job, dude.
I think I completely butchered that one, actually. Tomar is she's going to be the first Indian woman in the UFC. Odds state that she will not be the first one to pick up a win, at least not on Saturday, as Dos Santos comes in around -230, Tomar +180. Puja Tomar, as soon as she steps into the cage on Saturday, she's going to set a few other records. She's going to be the shortest fighter in UFC history. She's listed at 4'9", and while our man Devin Tejada has not been out to Uttar Pradesh to measure her with an actual tape measure, every fight of hers I saw, I can believe it, because I saw her fight B Nguyen that I've met in person, and B Nguyen is 4'11", and B was taller than Puja. I saw her fights in one championship where Stamp Fairtex was way bigger than her, and Stamp Fairtex doesn't look down on anybody. Puja Tomar is tiny. She's 4'9", a stocky. I mean, it's hard to refer to any strawweight as stocky, but she is stocky. She makes up for her shortness well in one way, in that she does like to kick a lot, but she hurts herself in that she also will just put her head down and rush forward with wide winging hooks like a little miniature Vanderlei Silva. It has served her well on the regional Indian fight scene, but even in one championship, it got her chewed up. I feel bad saying this because, again, she is a pioneer. She is the first woman from either the most populous country in the world or the second most populous country in the world to fight in the UFC. 10 years from now, if half the women's rankings are made of fighters from India, she will go down as a pioneer. Having said that, I don't see the point in this signing. I don't see anything that she really does at a UFC level. Her size is going to be a major disadvantage. Against fighters in Matrix Fight Night, her typical thing was to throw out some kicks. She does keep a high work rate. She throws lots of kicks. When she feels the moment is right, she will rush forward behind those hooks. She likes to initiate the clinch. She does some good dirty boxing from there, but it's really just all on aggression and volume. She doesn't do well with head position. Women who are taller than her, i.e. all of them, and who have any experience fighting in the clinch are just going to abuse her there, like Stamp Fairtex did. It's good that she's taking on Rayanne dos Santos, who is also very undersized for the division. I mean, she's a former atomweight, but I think Tomar's going to have rough sledding here. I think dos Santos is going to be superior in a distance kickboxing battle, and I think if Tomar does her thing of just rushing forward behind punches and forcing the clinch against the cage, I don't think she's going to make much headway against dos Santos there either. Dos Santos is likely to get bullied in the clinch by some fighters for as long as she hangs around the UFC, but not Tomar. So while I'm not high on either of these women to have much of a future in the UFC strawweight division, I expect dos Santos to get it done here. Give me dos Santos by a pretty one-sided decision where she's just outstriking Tomar at range, beating her up in the clinch. If things go to the ground, I've seen Tomar take some people down, but she has trouble keeping top position. One, because she doesn't really try to secure it, and two, again, just because she's so tiny. So give me Rayanne dos Santos to probably win all 3 rounds.
So yeah, the Fight Finder says that she's 4'9", and I was like, that's crazy. So I went over to Tapology. Tapology has her at 5'1". That's a big.
She is not 5'1". She is not 5'1".
I went to the UFC website to break the tie. They have her at 0'0". So
that's probably closer to the truth.
Dude, my 9-year-old son, I think, is like 4'4" or 4'5" or something. Like that's crazy that she's as tall as a fourth grader. Yeah, my son's in third grade, so she might have a couple inches on him. So probably about fourth or fifth grader got to beat. Dos Santos, they also call her. They call her Amanda.
Yeah,
I thought she beat Alencar in her last fight. Close fight, but I thought she should have won. She's very athletic. I would say she's undersized because she's a former atomweight, but I mean, she's gonna look like freaking Sean Woodson in this fight. I mean, Sean Woodson was probably like 4'9" when he came out of the wound. So
yeah, like he came out and his feet hit the floor of like the hospital room. It's like a baby deer. He just kind of like walked away.
He's like a baby giraffe.
Yeah.
So I think she moves well. She's pretty light on the feet. She's a good boxer. She attacks with combination. She's got a crisp jab. She doubles it up really well. Really nice snap on her shots. I like her left hook. While she's technical, she can be drawn into a brawl, and she'll throw down. I like that she works the body. She sits out her punches to generate some power. She throws combinations by, she'll slide, she'll dip, and then she'll come back with a big combination. She mixed up combinations high and low well, like go to the body, then go up high. I like that. She can sneak in a takedown. She's a very strong defensive wrestler. She's hard to take down. If she's on top, she's got good top game, good back take. She's got 8 subs, though she will jump Gilly. And her experience being Invicta, she's gone 25 minutes against good competition. Tomar, she's a southpaw. I think I like her better than you do.
You would have to. I'm super down on her.
Okay. She's fast. She's explosive. She can be wild, but she really steps in her shots. And she's got some pop. I mean, she's got 6 TKOs. She mixes punches and kicks together well. She's got really big kicking game, great dexterity in her kicks, mean hard kicks, big fast high kick, which to her is probably like someone's belly button, but still, she targets the calves. She loves that like Holly Holm push kick. Her last opponent, she broke her arm by kicking her. Like her opponent was blocking shots and it actually broke her arm. She will throw some naked leg kicks. Is open to that. She likes to use her like physical stature inside the clinch. She doesn't have any submission wins though, and she's been sub 3 times herself. So if he gets to the ground, that could be an issue. This is actually one of my favorite fights on the card. I like her much. Like I said, I like her much better than you. I think they both will do somewhat well. They both are undersized, especially like. Could you imagine Tomar if she got matched with, say, I know she's at 125 now, but like Rose Namajunas? Like how big of a difference that would be. It was Tatiana Suarez.
Oh, good grief. Yeah.
But Amanda has the edge in the boxing. I think Tomar has the edge in the kicking. She's got a really good kicking game. Amanda's definitely, I think, the better grappler. I think both will have their moments, but she's beaten the better competition already. I give her the edge. I think the edge might be a couple takedowns for her. Give me Amanda. I'll say she wins by unanimous decision.
Next up on the UFC on ESPN 57 prelims is a men's bantamweight matchup between Cody Stamann and Taylor Lapilus. Stamann, the 34-year-old Michigan native, is 21-6-1 overall. He is 7-5-1 in the UFC. He's coming in off of a loss. He fought most recently, almost exactly a year ago, at UFC on ABC Rosenstrike versus Almeida, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Douglas Silva de Andrade. Prior to that, he had been on a 2-fight win streak. So he'll look to start up a new streak here at the expense of Lapilus. 32-year-old Frenchman is 19-4 overall. He's 4-1 across 2 different stints in the UFC. 4-2 across 2 different stints in the UFC. He's 1-1 since being re-signed. He fought last September, taking a unanimous decision over Kalen Loughran, then came back in January at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2 and dropped a unanimous decision to Farid Basharat. So two bantamweights looking to get back in the win column here. Lapilus is the favorite. He's minus 210. Stamann plus 170. Can you tell me who you like in this fight and how you see it going?
Wow, those odds really surprised me. Stamann's well-rounded. He's a good athlete. He's obviously this wrestle boxer. He usually has good output, but in the matchup against Douglas Silva de Andrade, he refused to match his output and probably cost him that fight. Fast hands. He works behind a jab. He does well to get inside the pocket and land some hard shots in range. I think he has good footwork. He's kind of cutting angles, switching stances in mid-attack. Sneaky high kick. Does best when he's the one pressing the action and forcing his opponent back. Though he does have good footwork and is pretty elusive to move away and kind of keep his range. He can grind and clinch. He's a good wrestler, good entries, very physically strong, grab a leg and slam his opponent. Good at winning scrambles. But he recently abandoned his wrestling. He didn't look for enough wrestling against Luan Lacerda. I was actually surprised how easily he was taken down by Lacerda. I think he got absolutely screwed in the Andrade fight when he got a takedown and the referee stood him up after he got a takedown. Lapilus tough. This is he's a southpaw, really good striker, a bit of a sniper, very calculated. Output has been inconsistent at times. When he's at his best is when he's let his hands go, and he's got a good jab. His entire striking game really centered around that jab. Good straight left. He sets up his shots well with like a lot of hand fighting. I like his kicking game, hard leg kicks. He'll throw some naked leg kicks. He's open to that. He also makes the mistake of backing straight up when he's getting pressured, make it a little easy to hit, and he lacks head movement. In close, he looks a dirty box, and I like it. He can wrestle a little bit. He used to be a really bad defensive wrestler. Like his first run in the UFC is that's how you beat him. But his takedown defense has really kind of become a strength of his. In the last couple fights, if taken down, he gets right back up, and he has 6 submission wins. I was really surprised by the line. I thought Lapilus was going to be the underdog. If you matched these guys like 2 years ago, I would have picked Stamann easily. Stamann's, I think he's showing signs of decline. I mean, obviously his record indicates that. I think Lapilus, on the other hand, is showing me some improvements in his game. I thought it was going to be like a cool upset pick here. Obviously, he's not the upset. Lapilus is a pretty hefty favorite, I guess. I think Lapilus stuffs enough of Stamann's entries, and especially if Stamann doesn't wrestle, which might be very difficult based on what Lapilus has shown recently. I think Lapilus just picks him up for range. Give me Lapilus by decision.
Yeah, I had basically the same take on this. I was a little surprised at the line, and it robbed me of what I thought was going to be kind of a cool pick. I agree with you. Stamann, his record is pretty good in his last few fights, but he is starting to migrate away from the things that made him really successful, and that for a while maybe think that he might be a guy that could have snuck up on the outer edges of the bantamweight top 15, which is a hard thing to do, but he just doesn't look like that fighter anymore. You pointed out that, if you're a wrestle boxer and you abandon your wrestling and you stop throwing enough output on the feet, especially a bantamweight where you can't just wait for a single fastball knockout, you're going to have a tough time winning rounds. You're going to have a tough time winning fights. Lapilus, the first time the UFC let him go, he was 3-1 in the UFC when they let him go. He went, I know he went and boxed for a little while, and then he cropped back up kind of in European promotions and in TKO that has, Canadian promotion that has a lot of French speaking fighters, and was beating good people out there, like beating people like, Josh Hill, Nate Maness. He's always been a pretty good fighter, a little inconsistent. He's a guy that's always sometimes struggled to win rounds against fighters where he's the more talented and more athletic fighter and just leaves the round too close. That would make me shy about putting money on this one either way. But if both guys fight to their best potential compared to how they've been fighting in the last year or two, I agree that this looks like one where Lapilus will probably kind of win 2 rounds out of 3. I am interested to see what it would look like if Stamann decides to try and wrestle him early and often. But even if he does, I lean slightly towards Lapilus on this one too. Next up on the UFC Louisville prelims is a strawweight matchup between Eduarda Moura and Denise Gomes. Moura, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is a perfect 10-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. She is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. She won her UFC debut at UFC São Paulo last November, pounding out Montserrat Ruiz. That's the good news. The bad news is that Moura missed weight for that fight badly. She weighed in at I think 120 pounds for a strawweight contest. So she needs to get that straightened out or she won't have any kind of future at strawweight in the UFC. But she is getting another chance, and she's getting that chance against Gomes. 24-year-old Brazilian is 8-3 overall. She is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of the Contender Series. She's coming in off a loss. She fought at the very same São Paulo card last November, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Angela Hill. Prior to that, she had won back-to-back fights against Bruna Brazil and Yasmin Jauregui. Odds on this one? You know what? There are enough close lines on this card that I'm going to quiz you on a few of them. Your favorite here is -170. Your underdog is +140. Who are they?
Oh, this is going. Moura is the favorite.
You're correct. Eduarda Moura, -170. Denise Gomes, +140. Do you agree with that line? Do you think Moura gets it done? And regardless of who wins, do you think either of these women, because Moura is undefeated, Gomes is just 24 years old, do you think either of them is a future top 10 fighter in this division?
I think they both could be, especially if, Gomes can improve her takedown defense and Moura can, add striking, a little more striking to her wrestling base. I mean, she's a little older. She's 30, so she doesn't have. So if I had to pick one, I'd say Gomes is the one that most likely to get in the top 10 based on that age. I like her striking a lot. She's a high output kickboxer, constantly moving forward and throwing hard shots, slip and rip style. She's a little dangerous because she drops her hands and she does a lot of other defense things. I don't like she pillars all the time. She's shoulder rolls. She's also heavy on her front foot, so open to leg kicks. Because of this, she does have power. She's not even in her power years yet, and she has really good power. She sits on her punches. She loves her overhand right. She throws it a lot. She also has this short, tight hooks inside that opponents kind of keep her at bay. She keeps her opponents at bay, I should say. She's got good calf kicks, a hard high kick. She loves spinning attacks, which I'm not crazy about. She hit a roadblock against Angela Hill. She got beat up in the clinch against Angela Hill. She can wrestle a little bit. She's got good entries, though she's not a good defensive wrestler. She was taking out Angela Hill. She couldn't get out the bottom of Angela Hill, which is not, obviously not what Angela Hill's known for. She also she looks for switches to defend takedowns, which I've said this before, I don't think work well in MMA based on people's ability to lock hands in MMA, unlike wrestling. She also got headlocked by Loma Lookboonmee a bunch of times, which is not good. Though I know we both are much higher on Loma than the general public is.
But we're not high on headlock throws. So if that worked on you 3 times in one fight, that's not good.
No. But I like a gas tank. She keeps going hard. Moura, she's huge for the weight class, and worse when she misses weight. I think I was a little harsher on her striking. She doesn't have the striking that Gomes has. She's got a pretty good jab. She likes to slip and rip counter. She's got underrated power. She's very aggressive on the feet, but it's mostly just to close the distance. She uses striking to get to her grappling, open up her opportunities. Her threat of grappling does give her some opportunities to land strikes on the feet. Defensively, she keeps her chin a little too high. As far as her grappling, she's got some good entries. She's got strong top control. I like that she advances position on the ground. She's got mean ground and pound. You go back to her Contender Series fight, she battered her opponent on the ground. If she's taken down, she looks to sweep, and she's a little bit of a submission threat. This is one of the fights I said I like this fight. I think both fighters are really good. I really like Gomes striking. I really like Moura's grappling. I'm glad that you quizzed me on this line. I think it could be even closer, especially because of the age of Gomes, where she's at that age where she can just look so much better each fight. But Moura's a better grappler than Angela Hill is. Until I see Gomes be able to stop takedowns, I'm going to say Moura's be able to get the fight to the ground, do what she wants to do, be on top for the majority of the fight. Give me Moura by decision.
Yeah, I like the take there. I should have pointed out off the top that Eduarda Moura nicknamed herself Ronda, and I think there are about 7 women in the UFC right now who have named themselves Ronda. But as you kind of laid out your scouting report on Moura, I sort of checked the boxes. Okay, so needs to improve her striking, but she's definitely very aggressive. That's Ronda. Like she has more in common with Ronda Rousey than some of the other women that have taken the name on themselves. I agree with the assessment of Denise Gomes. I like her upside as a rising prospect just because she is young, she's athletic, she's very much cut from that Paranav Vale mold. Like if you stuck her in a line with the rest of them, with Jessica Andrade and Carl Rosa and all of them, they're all like stocky, powerful women that have like not the exact same skill set, but sort of there is a cookie cutter, kind of like there was the Team Alpha Male skill set that it worked for their body type and they all trained together. Like the women at PRVT are getting a little bit of that. And so what makes the differences between them, and you can hark back to our conversation last night about Islam Makhachev versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, is just it comes down to how much natural athleticism you're blessed with and how well you can make that basic approach go. And Gomes has more athleticism than most, and she does definitely have power. She's got that neck tattoo power. All I know is if you got a large tattoo on the front of your neck, I don't care if you're a 115-pound woman, you can probably knock me out.
Thiago Santos style.
Yeah, exactly. But you also laid out the crux of what the problem here is. Eduarda Moura is a good takedown artist, good topside grappler, and Denise Gomez's biggest weakness right now is her defensive wrestling. And her get up game, her defense from the bottom. So we're in a situation where she has a certain amount of time each round to take advantage of Moura's aggression, hurt her with something big. That's one way she wins this. Or the other way is Moura really isn't cut out to make 115 pounds anymore, and she gasses out bad late, and Gomes is able to turn it around on her. Those both seem to be the outside chance to me, which is why it makes sense to me that Moura is the favorite. And I do favor here. Give me Moura to win a decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if she either missed weight again or it was the kind of decision where she actually did have to hold on at the end as Gomes came on strong late. But I think she gets her hand raised as well. We head back to the men's bantamweight division next for a matchup between John Castaneda and the undefeated Daniel Marcos. Castaneda, the 32-year-old Minnesota native, is 21-6 overall. He's 4-2 since joining the UFC as an alum of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, was not immediately signed, went and won a bunch of fights in Combate. Since joining the UFC, 4-2, and he is on a 2-fight win streak, those being decision wins over Muin Gafarov and Kyung Ho Kang last year. He will try to make it 3 in a row against Marcos. 31-year-old Peruvian is 15-0 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-0 with 1 no contest in the UFC, joining out of season 6 of the Contender Series. His lone no contest came in his last appearance. He fought in February at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Pfeiffer, where his fight with Auri Chileng ended late in the second round of one of the most foul-plagued fights in UFC history on one of the most foul-plagued cards in UFC history. I mean, I remember our recap from that just being a complete shit show because the card was. He's going to try to prove that he has more to his game than nut shots. He's even money to do so. This is the one true pick 'em on the entire card, as neither man is available plus money. They're both around -110 or -115, depending on which book you choose. Keith, you have traditionally been a little higher on Marcos than me. The one thing you've kind of held against him is that he's already 31 in a division that's not typically kind to the elderly. But if he can keep it legal and keep winning, I mean, it's there for him. Does he get it done here?
This is a tough test because I think Castaneda is a really underrated fighter too. So this might be my favorite fight on the entire card because I think it's the one that'll probably answer the most questions. I mean, I think Castaneda is what it is. He's always going to be a tough test for everyone. He has like a poor man's Anthony Hernandez feel to him, where he's not going to be the sexiest pick, but he's always going to be a really, really tough out. And like, he could be a really surprising guy rising up the rankings that no one really saw coming. Where Marcos is the guy that he has that flashy record, but hasn't had the hype that other people with worse records get. So this will let us know about both those guys. But particularly Marcos, the guy that probably draws the most interest. Marcos, I like his striking a lot. He's a pressure striker that marches down his opponent with his high guard defense. He's a controlled pressure fighter. He's technically sound. I think he's a little bit of a sniper, very accurate, fast hands. He keeps everything short and tight. He sees his shots and he lands well. I've said this in the last fight. He was thrown to spots to catch his opponents as they try to escape, which is such an intelligent thing to do. Just touches when there's an opening. He has a lot of variety in his striking. He's got plus power. I love that he's made going to the body such a big part of his game. He's really added low kicks in now. He's bashing that. He's not much of a grappler, but he did get some I think he got one takedown against Davey Grant in a close fight. But he's a weak defensive wrestler, and that's a big issue going against a guy like Castaneda. Castaneda is southpaw. He's a long and lengthy striker. He moves really well. He wants to kind of work from space in the outside. In the fight against Daniel Santos, he hated being pressured back. He kind of wants to keep his distance. He does well because he cuts angles well and stuff to keep it there. I like his output. Those straight shots down the pipe. I love his straight left, the short, not a lot of tells. He's got a lot of variety in striking. He's got serious power. I mean, he knocked out Eddie Wineland. He hurt Miles Johns. He hurt Daniel Santos. Gaffarov's another guy. I mean, he's keeps cracking guys. Mean body kicks. He's got a beautiful high kick. Quick. It's quick. Not much telling that. And he's a very good wrestler. He's got 3 takedowns in 3 straight fights each. He's good at wing and scrambles. He's got 7 subs. The one concern probably is that the fight against Daniel Santos was kind of gassed a little bit in that one. I think it's a really good matchup. I like both guys a lot. If the fight remains on the feet, I think it'll be a lot of fun. With Marcos, I would probably give a slight edge. If it hits the ground, it's likely Castaneda getting takedowns and winning the grappling. Castaneda has more avenues for victory. I'm still leaning slightly for Marcos. I love this dude striking. I like both guys. I think we might have a war. I think both guys will have moments. I think Castaneda is going to get the fight to the ground at times, but Marcos is going to find ways to get back to his feet. And I think we're going to have this fight swinging back and forth, but I think Marcos is going to stay undefeated. I think his striking, his speed, his variety, his accuracy is going to give him a slight edge. Give me Marcos by split decision.
This is definitely one of the hardest fights on the card to call. Rightly so. It's a dead pick'em right now. There's not a whole lot to pick at about Marcos's game. I mean, he is undefeated. 31 isn't ideal for someone who's this short into his UFC career, but for what it's worth, the fight against Alrici Lang that ended in a no contest, it's a little worrisome because it's a fight that he was otherwise winning. And he I feel as though he let himself get pulled out of his own head. For those who don't remember, there were 4 groin fouls in the second round. And after the second one, there was one thrown immediately afterward that was obvious retaliation. Like, once you get to the retaliation point, that's the point in the baseball game where you have a bench clearing brawl. Like, it's always the second hit by pitch that causes the brawl. But these guys are already in a brawl. So all they have to do is keep kicking each other in the nuts. It was the dumbest thing ever. Like, I don't think that's likely to happen in this fight. It's just something that I filed away for. If Daniel Marcos gets 15 fights in the UFC, I'll still think about this every time he's out there fighting. Other than that, I see this fight a lot the way you do. They're both very good strikers, and it may well be that Marcos, just his speed, his combination punching, his fast hands will give him the edge over Castaneda. But Castaneda does have that other outlet, that he's a good wrestler and he's a good grappler. You pointed out, I mean, he took down Muin Gaffarov, 3 times with the entire nation of Tajikistan watching. Even before his last 3 fights, He got a topside submission on Miles Johns, where Miles Johns' best weapon at the UFC level is his wrestling, and Castaneda like really handled him on the ground. I like that Castaneda has that in his back pocket, and that's why I lean towards Castaneda here. Give me Castaneda in a decision where at least one of the 3 rounds he wins it because he had the wrestling as a safety valve and as an avenue to open up offense for himself. Or maybe he takes Marcos down, gets top position, beats him up a little on top, and more importantly, like puts a pause on the striking battle for the rest of the round. We stay in the men's bantamweight division for a matchup between Brad Katona and Jesse Butler. Katona, the 32-year-old Canadian, is 13-3 overall. He's 3-3 in the UFC across 2 separate stints with the promotion. He is 1-1 since rejoining the UFC as the winner of season 27 of The Ultimate Fighter. He beat Cody Gibson at the finale last August to be the season winner, then came back and lost to Garrett Armfield via decision at UFC 297 in January. So he'll look to get back on track, get his UFC record above 500. Standing in his way will be Butler. 32-year-old Louisiana native is 12-5 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He joined the UFC last June at UFC on ESPN, Cara France versus Albazi, stepping up on short notice to face Jim Miller up a weight class, got knocked out in just 23 seconds. He has been out ever since. He is returning here and is dropping from 155 all the way through 145, where he conducted most of his regional career, down to meet Katona at 135 pounds. He hopes that will rejuvenate his chances in the octagon. The odds makers seem to think it will not, as Katona is one of the bigger favorites you'll see in the UFC all year. He's around minus 550, minus 600. Butler out there around plus 400, plus. You heard me.
Wait. Brad Katona is a minus, what was that?
Minus 550.
Brad Katona
is minus 550. Jesse Butler around plus 400.
I got to check the fight. Is there 2 Brad Katonas? Is it a different Brad Katona I don't know about?
It's 2 Brad Katonas, and Butler has to fight them both at the same time. That's the only way they're going to tag team.
Brad Katona, a negative 550. I would have put him as a negative 550 if he was fighting Mincy Betts. If he was fighting the
that's just because you're hoping as a Canadian he'd be too nice to really hit her hard.
Yeah, he probably would. If he was fighting that lady at the weigh-in that calls everyone baby, like step on the scale, baby, 3, 2, 1. Like dude could be fighting Hasbulla, and I would have put him as a negative 550 favorite. Like fucking Brad Katona. I mean, maybe in the Ultimate Fighter house, like for some reason the guy gets like superpowers when he goes in that, but it's okay. Anyways, all right. Sorry to interrupt you.
Please interrupt me anytime. I don't know, man. Here, Jesse Butler was a pretty good regional featherweight. He's from Louisiana, right across the border. He fought in Fury a bunch. I can't remember whether he won a title or not, but he strung together, 3 or 4 wins. He's not super athletic, which costs him on the feet, but it doesn't cost him to the point where fighters at like the Fury level were really able to make him pay for it. And beyond that, mentioning something that I'm going to say about another fighter further up the card, he's mostly a grappler and an opportunist who does well in scrambles because he uses his long frame well to kind of attack people from unexpected angles. I don't know if that's going to help him against Katona. I always expect Katona to be older than he is just because he's back in the UFC and it feels like a million years ago. Like anything that happened, well, in general news, period, or especially in MMA, anything that happened before COVID feels like it's an extra 5 years ago, longer than it really was. Like he washed out of the UFC in 2019, like 6 months before COVID hit, and it feels to me like it was 10 years ago. I can't believe he's only 32. I expected him to be like 36.
Yeah, but he's also, I think his personality adds into that too. Brad Katona is the kind of guy that like you have a conversation with him and he wants to talk about the weather.
Yeah. And even on Tough, like every season of Tough has 1 or 2 fighters that they aren't necessarily older, but they just seem more mature. They're not there for the hijinks. They're like, this is 6 weeks away from my wife. No, I don't want to do shots of Jaeger with you guys. I just want to go to bed. Just like the first guy I can think of like that was Mac Danzig. Mac Danzig's like, I'm a straight edge vegan. Like, I don't want to be in this house with you assholes. I just want to, get my contract. Yeah.
You guys are doing shots and Katona is having like he's having like a gin and tonic.
He's having some old man drinks and makes himself. Just Butler is going to be way bigger than Katona. Assuming he makes 135 with no issue, he's going to be a big bantamweight because he was kind of a tall, long-armed featherweight. But I just don't think it's going to matter. Katona is well-rounded enough and athletic enough. I think he's going to avoid the kind of collisions with Butler that would lead to the kind of scrambles where Butler's going to be able to get his offense off. I don't think Katona has the kind of Jim Miller old man power to just ice Butler with a punch, especially 20 pounds down. But I just expect Katona to win kind of a dull fight here. I just give me Katona to win a very Brad Katona fight where he avoids Butler's best weapons and does enough to win each round. I could see him wrestling Butler if he feels Butler is tired or compromised enough that he can do it without too much risk. Otherwise, I could see him just sort of like boxing him up on the feet and avoiding Butler's attempts to kind of lunge in, clinch, crash the pocket, create chaos. Katona by decision. I don't feel 6-1 about it, but no. I feel 2-1 about it. Yeah.
Holy Christ, Brad Katona, big. He's coming off a loss too. That's the crazy thing, Yeah. Brad Katona, his volume can be super inconsistent. Like one fight, he's got really good striking volume. The next one, his output is super low, and he's more avoiding shots than doing anything. His boxing is tight. I'll give him that. He sets up his shots well with feints. When he's doing his best, like against the Cody Gibson fight, he was throwing a lot of, was coming in to attacking with combinations, throwing a lot of hooks. His left hook is kind of his best punch. In his last fight, though, he was really telegraphing his overhand right. He can kind of overswing too. I do like that he'll go to the body. He lacks punching power, though. Other than Cody Gibson, he's not really known for, you think about all his runs of the house and stuff. He wasn't starching guys. He has no problem closing distance and just grinding in the clinch, dirty boxing, looking for a body lock, clinch takedown. When he gets to fight the ground, because he can wrestle, he'll stay glued to his opponents. He has no problem stalling on top, and he has 3 sub wins. Jesse Butler, the guy's 32 years old. I'm glad he got his UFC debut. Didn't want to get knocked out in freaking 20 seconds by Jim Miller, but this guy's got a lot of professional experience, a lot of amateur experience. Just one of these guys, he is what he is. That's the peak of his career. I made it to the UFC. He's not much of an athlete. His UFC debut couldn't have gone any worse. He's on the feet. He's very aggressive. He attacks with combinations, and he has decent pop. But you got to be worried about his chin after being. I mean, he wasn't knocked out by Jim Miller. He was knocked dead by Jim Miller. He can grapple a little bit. He looks for body lock takedowns, but he isn't a wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He's definitely more of a grappler. He needs to improve in control, but he's a submission threat. He's got 8 submissions in his record. I'm picking Katona. Again, I wasn't picking him 6-1. There is times where he looks good. I think he closes the distance. He works inside the clinch. I think he sneaks in a few takedowns. Give me Katona by unanimous decision.
Next up on the UFC Louisville prelims, we have a women's flyweight rematch that we never knew we needed as Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa get ready to lock them up one more time. Lee, the 35-year-old Louisianan, is 13-7 overall. She is 5-7 in the UFC, and she is one of 2 fighters on this card on a 4-fight losing streak. She comes into this fight having not won since November of 2021. Since then, she has losses to Viviane Araújo, Macy Barber, Natalia Silva, and Miranda Maverick. The most recent of those, the Maverick fight, was at UFC 298 back in February. So Lee, I would say she's fighting for a job, but I thought she was fighting for a job the last couple times. So what do I know? I'm sure she would like to break the streak, and who better to do it against than someone she's already beaten in De La Rosa. 29-year-old Montana native is 12-9-1 overall. She's 5-5-1 since joining the UFC out of season 26 of The Ultimate Fighter. She is on a 3-fight losing streak. She has not won since June of 2021. So she's coming up on 3 full years. It'll be 3 full years since her last win. Since then, she has losses to Barber, Tatiana Suarez, and JJ Aldrich. The most recent of those, the Aldrich fight, was last October at UFC Fight Night Dawson versus Green. So 2 women badly in need of a win, to say the least. Odds on this one, pretty close. The favorite is -120. The underdog +100, even money. Who are they?
I'll say Andrea Lee's favorite.
You are correct. Lee, just the slightest of favorites. De La Rosa coming back at +100. Here's the thing. Andrea Lee beat Montana De La Rosa almost exactly 5 years ago. It was June 22nd of 2019. Lee won all 3 rounds, but all 3 rounds were competitive. And it was kind of a fight that told the story of both fighters, because Lee, despite coming from a camp called Karate Mafia, and despite how she like poses at weigh-ins and stuff, we've talked about it before. She's not as athletic as she looks, though she is very strong, and she's at her best as kind of a wrestler, grinder, top position grappler. Like, her takedown defense is not good, so she kind of makes up for that by initiating the ground game when she's at her best, by initiating the ground game, because she is pretty good from top position. Like, she hasn't won fights in a couple years, but Antonina Shevchenko and Cynthia Calvillo, both of those were fights that she won. 1, because neither of them is a good fighter, and 2, because she initiated the ground game and got right on him and beat him up. De La Rosa, she's not that young anymore. She's now 29, but she was so young and broke into the sport so young that she's basically learned to fight under the bright lights. I mean, I remember the first Mackenzie Dern fight I ever saw was her making pretzels out of De La Rosa in LFC back when they were both like 22 years old or something. De La Rosa isn't a super great athlete either, but she is big for the division. Big, strong, and she has parlayed that into making the best of her gifts. Kind of like Lee, she's not super athletic, but she's become a good wrestler, presumably from being married to Mark De La Rosa for all these years. And while she's not a great striker, she's a striker who tries to make the best use of her length. Like, she tries to stick a jab out there. She tries to use kicks to manage distance, because even though she's big, she's not at her best when stronger, like stockier women crash the pocket against her and get inside. Since these 2 fought, and neither of them have made huge strides in their skills since then, it's tempting to just go with Lee because, they're roughly the same fighters they were 5 years ago. But since then, Lee is 2-7 and has just looked so bad and so inert sometimes. Like, even if you think she was robbed against Lauren Murphy and she should be 3-6, my point still stands. The last 4 years have not been particularly kind to Andrea Lee in terms of her game, just slowing down, gas tank becoming more and more of a question mark. Whereas De La Rosa is probably just now cresting her prime, whatever that prime may be. One of these 2 needs to get a win, presumably, and maybe preserve her job. Give me Montana De La Rosa to even this thing up at 1 fight apiece. Their first fight, neither of them could stop a takedown from the other. De La Rosa took Lee down several times. Lee took De La Rosa down, and it just felt like Lee won each round by spending a little more time on top, by being more aggressive when she was on top and doing a little more damage. But again, it was a competitive 30-27. Give me that to just have flipped thanks to the 4 years that have elapsed in between. So give me Montana De La Rosa to win 2 rounds out of 3, or maybe all 3, just by being a little bit better wrestler, that much fresher, younger. And if either woman has made any improvements in her game over the last 4 years, Montana De La Rosa's striking is probably the single thing that's improved at all between either of them. So maybe that comes into play as well. But yeah, give me De La Rosa to spring the slightest of upsets here.
Oh, that's a pretty good fight. Oh, man.
And if there's an anti-fight of the night pick, like a smoke break pick, this one might be it.
Smoke him if you got him. You're absolutely right. Angela Lee has looked absolutely terrible lately. She used to be this high output striker, point fighter on the feet. I totally agree with what you're saying about being a top side grappler, but I mean, like on the feet, like if she's striking, she wanted to, use output from the outside, but her volume has absolutely plummeted. She used to want to work from range, throw straight punches down the pipe. She wanted to keep her distance with her striking, and she kind of hated pressure from, like when you go back to like the Macy Barber fight, but she's always had no power. It's gone even worse. She's a bit of a point fighter. She works behind a jab. That's where she beat up Cynthia Calvillo with the jab. She has a good kicking game, teep kicks, body kicks. She's a solid wrestler, as you mentioned. She wrestles a lot. Even in this run where she's declined, she got 2 takedowns against Miranda Maverick in her last fight, which is pretty good. She's good at winning scrambles. But some of the moves she was going for, I said this last time, like she was going for youth wrestling moves. She went for a Peterson, like. It does not work at high level MMA. She's a weak defensive wrestler. Miranda Maverick took her down easily. She's been taken down. I looked this up. She's been taken down 27 times so far in the UFC. When she's on top, she needs to prove her top control. And she's on pin on the bottom. She struggles to get back to the feet. Martina De La Rosa, she's a long and lengthy fighter. She's a counter striker, but she looked really bad recently. She used to be like a slip and rip striker, work behind a jab, follow straight shots, though she could lunge and lose technique, but she got busted up on the feet against JJ Aldridge. She was just like ducking and throwing, not sending anything up in that fight. She does have a little bit more power than she gets credit. Like she dropped Mauro Romero Borello with a shot. She has a big kicking game, but oftentimes she throws them naked. She's heavy on her front foot, leave her open to leg kicks. She has struggled with the speed of faster people like Viviana Araujo. She struggled with the speed, though she did start coming on a little later. She's a solid wrestler. She's got some good entries, and she's usually committed to get the fight to the ground and use her like long legs and back trips. But she completely abandoned her wrestling against Adrian Aldridge. Makes you really worried because that was like her biggest strength. Create a scramble, get back tags, hold them there, use those long legs. She has a submission that she has 8 subs on her record, though she can lose position looking for subs. She may did against Angela Lee. Dude, I have no idea in this fight. I'm not high on either one at this point. They both were pretty solid, like lower top 10 fighters, at their peak. But I think both fighters might be shot. The one thing I will say is, to their credit, they've lost to good fighters during the streak, when you go over their record, but they're still losing constantly. De La Rosa surprised me that you mentioned she's only 29 years old. Like, she's 29, but somehow she has a kid who's 30. I don't know how that works. But I'm with you, man. We're going to have a consensus slight underdog pick. I think De La Rosa's get the revenge. She's the younger one. I say both have moments, but maybe De La Rosa still has a little bit of an edge in the wrestling. She wins some exchanges, and she wins a very close, I'll say, split decision in a really ugly fight.
Second from the top of the UFC Louisville prelims is a welterweight matchup between Charlie Radtke and Carlos Prates. Radtke, the 33-year-old American, is 9-3 overall. He's 2-0 in the UFC. He already fought once this year. It was at the Dolidze versus Imavov fight night back in February, knocking out Gilbert Urbina late in the first round. So he's looking to kind of unexpectedly pop in and go 3-0 in one of the deepest divisions in the UFC. In order to do so, he will have to get past Prates. 30-year-old Brazilian is 18-6 overall. He's 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of the Contender Series. He debuted at the Hermansson versus Pfeiffer fight night card in February, knocking out Trevor Giles late in the second round. Odds here favor Prates pretty heavily. He's -200, Radtke +165 on the comeback. Keith, this is a fun matchup because it's two guys named Charles. One goes by Chuck Buffalo, and the other one nicknamed Carlone basically means Big Charlie. So we got Chuck Buffalo versus Big Charlie.
Which is coincidence. Coincidence
Yeah.
was our nicknames in high school.
Exactly.
You were Big Charlie, and I was Chuck Buffalo.
Exactly.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, they sound like wrestling room like nicknames.
Chuck Buffalo, that's great.
Well, dude, you remember when Patrick Cummins was in the UFC for a hot minute? You know, he kind of trolled DC into getting that.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, his nickname was Durkin because his name was Patrick Durkin Cummins. That's the most wrestling thing ever. Because freshman year, somebody learned that his middle name was Durkin, and Durkin was his nickname for the rest of his career, like high school, college, Olympic hopeful. Everyone's calling him Durkin. That's such a wrestler thing.
I had this one kid I was coaching wrestling many years ago, probably, I don't know, 2012 maybe. I was coaching at a local high school, and there was a kid, he was a freshman. His first day of wrestling practice, he showed up wearing a Nickelback, the band shirt, which was like, first of all, was what? But he was also like this short, fat freshman kid, like, what are you doing coming out from wrestling? But he stuck around for 4 years. He didn't win many matches, but forever he was called Nickelback. I called him Nickelback. Never, I don't remember his name. It was just Nickelback.
None of my sons ended up being wrestlers, but if any of them had shown interest in that direction, I wouldn't have been like, tell you what, I'll work with you in advance, go through some positions. All I would have told him was be real careful the first week of practice, because whatever you do that's weird is going to stick with you for the rest of your life.
My favorite wrestling nickname is Owen. Do you don't know that one? When you go to a tournament, you go 0-2. Owen. Oh. Hey, Owen.
That's amazing. All right. Anyway, Radtke versus Prates. Not very far into the experiment, but they're both.
Let's do it again. Charlie Buffalo and
Chuck Buffalo and Big Charlie.
Yeah, which one was which though?
Radtke is Chuck Buffalo. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So Chuck Buffalo versus
Prates is Brazilian. You've never seen a buffalo.
Yeah. What was that's the other one? Big Charlie.
Carlone, which just basically means Big Charlie. Yeah.
Big Charlie and Chuck Buffalo. All right.
And also, he's a welterweight. If you're calling a welterweight Big Charlie, have none of these people ever met like Johnny Walker? Yeah. Anyway, who you got in this one? Two guys are still undefeated in the UFC, even though it's pretty early on in the experiment.
Well, Chuck Buffalo he's a big guy for the weight class. I mean, his name's Buffalo. He's pretty well rounded. He's a solid striker. Throws straight shots down the pipe. He's got a good left hook. I mean, he showed nice power. I mean, he rocked Blood Diamond on the feet, which was a big, thing at the time. And then he knocked out Gilbert Urbina in his last fight, and it was also a left hook. So hard kicks. The problem is his defense. He's been rocked in the past. He does close distance, but he's not much of a wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler, more of a grappler. He's got some pretty good back takes. He's a submission threat. He has 2 subs on his record. Big Charlie, on the other hand, he kickboxer. He can fight at both stances. He loves to fight at range, sharp shoot from the outside. Very relaxed, bit of a sniper. He does hang his hands a little low, almost a little too relaxed. Sometimes he can cruise and spend too much time picking up reads and giving away moments or giving away whole rounds, especially when he's throwing single strikes and his output is a little low. When he's letting his hands go, he's got a great jab, very accurate straight left. That's why I said, he switches stances, but I like him better in the southpaw stance. I mean, his straight left is pretty deadly. He has this Conor McGregor style fade back left hand, which I like. He's got great power. I mean, he's got 13 TKOs. He's got a huge kicking game, good teep kicks, great high kick, hard calf kicks. I love that he throws some step in knees. An issue I have is that he can throw single strikes a little too much. Trying to end it with one big shot. Not much of an offensive grab blow, but he's got good takedown defense. If taken down, he does pop right back up. I'm with the betting lines. I like Big Charlie here. His striking is really good. I see him landing that teep kick from distance a lot, and then finishing with a big shot late. I'm gonna say it in the very first round, late in the first round, I should say, with that straight left. Give me Big Charlie, but first round TKO.
Yeah, I would love to differ from you here, but there's a difference between these two. It's been fun to have Charlie Radtke in the UFC. He's had 2 good fights, 1 fantastic knockout. He seems to have just kind of a fun personality. I think it'll be nice if he sticks around long enough to have a mic put in his face a few more times. But effectively, he sort of came in out of nowhere and has gone 2-0 in the UFC by beating maybe the 2 worst welterweights on the roster. Like Blood Diamond was just not ready for MMA, and Gilbert Urbina, about the best you can say for him is he's probably the best Urbina brother. Like the Charlie Radtke is just waiting to run into the right guy. Whereas Prates came in and he took on Trevin Giles, a guy that is a top 15 talent and is just vulnerable to getting sniped. And guess what? He sniped him. You mentioned his left hand. That left hand put Trevin Giles out cold in a way that nobody really has yet. If you're watching the show, you know that Trevin Giles is one of my guys. He's a Houston guy. I like his coach. I like him, but he's the Death Star. He's got all the offensive weapons, but there's, if you can hit the little exhaust port, he does blow up. But that's usually been like, okay, he gets staggered, you swarm and finish. Carlos Prates iced Trevin Giles like I've not seen before, to the point that I was concerned about Giles after that knockout. I don't think it'll come to that against Radtke, because the thing is, Prates was losing that fight until he caught him. I think he's going to be a step ahead the whole time. I think you're right. And while it's fair to critique him for his tendency to wait and throw single strikes, it's not going to cost him against Radtke. I like him by first round knockout as well, and he's probably going to have Radtke kind of on his heels until he gets the knockout. The top prelim at UFC on ESPN 57 is a lightweight matchup between Thiago Moises and Ludovit Klein. Moises, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 18-7 overall. He's 7-5 since joining the UFC out of season 1 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is coming in off a win. He fought back in March at UFC Fight Night Tuivasa versus Tybura, where he put Mitch Ramirez away early in the 3rd round after feeding him a steady diet of leg kicks. He will look to make it 2 in a row here at the expense of Klein. 29-year-old Slovakian is 21-4-1 overall. He's 5-2-1 in the UFC. He is on a 5-fight undefeated streak and a 2-fight win streak. He fought already once this year. He fought at the Rosenstrike versus Gaziev fight night back in March, knocking out AJ Cunningham with a liver kick and follow-up punches late in the 1st round. So he's looking to establish himself as a rising force in the lightweight division. The odds are close on this one, so I'll throw it to you. Your favorite is -130. Your underdog around +105 or so. Who are they?
I'm going to guess Klein is a favorite.
You're correct. Klein is the slight favorite. I thought Ludovit Klein was going to be a whole lot of fun when he joined the UFC as a featherweight, and a little undersized even for a featherweight. But I was like, his nickname is Mr. Highlight, Mr. Highlight, and it's a fitting one because his regional highlight reel is impressive. Just exciting, explosive guy, all offense, opportunistic submissions, as well as fantastic knockouts, lots of flying stuff. I thought this will be a lot of fun, but he's probably going to come up against a hard ceiling at 145. I was wrong on both counts. For one, he's up at 155, and 2, he's on a 5-fight unbeaten streak. And while he hasn't really hit the cream of the division yet, he's fighting pretty good fighters. And better yet, as if to underscore the fact that, yeah, I'm 5'8" and I'm doing this thing at lightweight, the UFC has matched him up against several of the largest people in the division. Devontae Smith, Jai Herbert, Ignacio Bahamondes, all those guys are 6'1" or taller, and Ludovit Klein's got past them. Until the Cunningham fight, the highlight reel stuff kind of took a back seat. Maybe kind of like a European version of someone like Michel Pereira. He has backed off on the crazy flying stuff a little bit, but he's still a very explosive striker who has a ton of power in everything. At featherweight, it was a little concerning because, one, he would overswing and overextend himself a little bit, and his gas tank would betray him from time to time. That's how he lost to Nate Landwehr. He was tailor-made for Nate Landwehr to kind of outlast, not get knocked out, and start rolling downhill on him late. But that seems to have gone away at 155 because he still doesn't always throw a ton of volume, but he still throws big offense that wows the judges when it lands. And he's shown himself capable of doing it for 3 5-minute rounds. So Ludovit Klein has been a bit of a pleasant surprise, where Moises, I have to keep reminding myself not to jump completely off the bandwagon. He's still just 28 years old. He's one of those guys that got a couple of key wins early on, and that led to him getting pushed to the forefront probably sooner than was necessary. Like, the UFC started out from the right way. He lost 2 of his first 3 fights, and they were, again, like, he lost to Beneil Dariush and Damir Ismagulov, 2 top 10 talents within his first 3 fights. At the time, he was like 22, 23 years old. But once he strung together those 3 wins in a row against Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, and Alexander Hernandez, he got kind of thrust into top 10 matchups, and it's taken him a long time to make his way back down. He's become one of those guys that, because he has some name recognition and because he has some good names on his resume, the UFC has a tough time matching him appropriately. Anytime he strings together a couple of wins in a row, he gets thrust right back in against the top 10 level opponents. I think he's still developing. His losses in the last couple of years, like, well, Islam Makhachev, that's going to happen to everybody. But the things about Thiago Moises, he is a good grappler. Like, that's always been what he hangs his hat on. But I don't think I realized how much his striking had lagged behind it until fairly recently. And he's another of those guys that he looks like a top shelf athlete, but he's just a good athlete. Here, Klein is a slight favorite over him, and I'm tempted to take the upset, but just Klein has shown himself pretty capable of staying on his feet, and he's shown himself capable of throwing his kind of offense for 3 rounds without gassing out. Moises is still a better grappler than wrestler. He has still kind of struggled for ways to get the fight to the ground in the place, position, and circumstances of his choosing against good UFC lightweights. And I think at this point, Klein is a good UFC lightweight. I like Klein to win this one, and it might be a thing where it's like 2 rounds to 1, but the 2 rounds that Klein won, he really beat the crap out of Moises. And the 1 round that Moises won, yeah, he got Klein on the ground, and Klein had to survive, took a long time to work back up to his feet, and Moises won the round almost by default. So give me Klein by a win that is probably more convincing than the scorecards will show.
Yeah, this is a fight that I'm one of the ones I'm most intrigued by. That's why we were talking about the previous. I think there's some pretty good fights. When we're talking about the whole card, I think there's some of the fights that are not near the top of the card that is probably better than some of the fights on the top of the card. This is one of them. Moises, I mean, he's a tough test for anybody. That's why I had a hard time, guessing who was the favorite. Moises, on the feet, he's a decent boxer. He's got some quick hands. He keeps everything tight. He has some power. Not the best athlete. He's a little flat-footed. He also doesn't have the best output at times. He's got a good kicking game. He throws a lot of kicks to the body. He's finished, so who was it that he stopped? He stopped someone with leg kicks.
Klein? Yeah, it was
Moises.
Yeah, it was just within his last couple fights. I named him.
I'm sorry. Let me pull it up. This is great. This is a great radio.
I'll snip it out.
Yeah. Shit. I just watched it. That's why it's driving me crazy. Mitch Ramirez. It was his last fight. Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, where it came early in the 3rd round, but it could have been stopped at the end of the 2nd because Ramirez could barely move. Yeah.
Yeah. So, he stopped Mitch Ramirez with leg kicks. He mixes his striking in with his takedown attempts well. The problem is he's a BJJ guy who wrestles. He's a better wrestler than a lot of BJJ guys, but he's a guy that he's got to catch you completely. He's got to time it perfectly because he's not going to shoot on your hips, have you sprawled out a little bit, and be able to drive through to the 2nd level. That's not him. He will shoot often, try to, close the distance. And he has no problem pulling guard. I think that's why he throws a lot of kicks too. He doesn't care if you catch a kick. He's a very good BJJ practitioner. He's got 8 submission wins in his career. He'll drop down an ankle. I go back to like the Michael Johnson fight where he caught him with an ankle lock. He almost caught Bobby Green with an ankle lock. So that's where he's going to try to get Klein down. Klein, he's a southpaw, very athletic, moves really well. He's a technical striker, a bit of a sharpshooter. He's got fast hands. He sets up his shots really well with feints. Got a good jab. I love his feedback left hand. I love that he works the body. He's got some serious power. I say this because I've always impressed with his foot placement. I go back to like that Mason Jones fight. He dropped him with a big shot. He's got a really good kicking game, mean kicks to really all parts of the body. Calf kicks. He'll throw up a high kick really fast. And his grappling has like really come along. Suddenly he can wrestle. I mean, he's getting takedowns in fights. He's got good entries. His defensive wrestling was super shaky when he first came in, when he was losing to Mike Trezano. But since then, I mean, solid takedown defense against Devontae Smith, solid takedown defense against Mason Jones. The line being close scares me because, I see obviously avenues for victory for both of these guys. I'm with you, man. I'm going to take Klein. Moises is super tough, especially if he gets the fight to the ground. While Klein has made huge improvements there, if he's taken down and Moises on his back, so that's big trouble. I just don't think he's going to be able to get it there. I think he's going to eat too many shots, some big shots from Klein. I see Klein wins a decision.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Louisville begins with a welterweight matchup between Miguel Baeza and Punahele Soriano. Baeza, the 31-year-old Floridian, is 10-3 overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC out of Dana White's Contender Series, Season 3. Much like an inning of baseball, he has been 3 up, 3 down, as he won his first 3 upon joining the promotion to mark himself a person of interest in the division, and since then has come up against the wall, losing 3 straight, 2 of them by knockout. He hasn't fought in a little over 2 years. He fought at the Luque versus Muhammad 2 fight night card back in April of 2022, getting knocked out by Andre Fialho late in the first round. He'll be looking to turn that around, perhaps keep his job against Soriano, who is probably thinking similar thoughts here. 31-year-old Hawaiian by way of Las Vegas is 9-4 overall. He's 3-4 since joining the UFC out of the very same season of Dana White's Contender Series. He has lost 4 of his last 5 and lost both of his fights last year, getting knocked out by Roman Kopylov in January and tapped out by Dustin Stoltzfus, whom we'll be talking about a little bit later in December. Based on those results, Soriano decided that his best future lay in the welterweight division, so he has taken 6 months off. He has dropped the 15 pounds, and he will make his welterweight debut here. Keith, your favorite is minus 170. Your underdog plus 140. Who are they? It's tough, isn't it? It's the guy that hadn't fought in 2 years versus the guy dropping a weight class for the first time.
I'll say Baeza is a favorite.
You're correct. Miguel Baeza, the favorite, minus 170. Puna Soriano, plus 140. Baeza kind of came out of nowhere. Like,
and then went to nowhere.
And then went. Yeah, I guess he regressed to the mean pretty quickly. Like, yeah, he won his first 3 in the UFC, and no matter where on the ladder you start, if you're talking about the UFC welterweight division, that's pretty impressive. We just talked about Charlie Radtke. Yeah, he won 2 in a row against 2 of the lower level welterweights in the UFC, but that's not like saying the same thing of a heavyweight or a women's bantamweight or something. Like, there are no terrible welterweights in the UFC. And Baeza, he got a little bit of shine by outlasting Matt Brown in a really fun brawl of a fight that, won him a little bit of recognition. He seemed to be a guy kind of coming out of nowhere and cruising towards being a ranked welterweight, but then he hit the wall. And really, the wall for Miguel Baeza was once he ran into the hard punchers in the division. Baeza, he's a tall, lanky striker, and despite being tall and rangy, is not great at keeping shorter fighters at bay and has always been a little hittable against a very dilapidated, I think 38 years old at the time, Matt Brown. That was good enough for him to win, like outlast Brown in a really fun brawling fight. But you can't do that to Chaos Williams and Andre Fialho. You couldn't even do that to the dilapidated ghost of Santiago Ponzinibbio. And that's where Baeza has run into trouble. His propensity for swinging wild, coming in with his chin in the air, letting shorter, stocky guys get into the phone booth with him has cost him. If Puna Soriano is able to make the cut from 185 to 170, he's exactly the kind of guy who can take advantage of that. Because even though Soriano is the former middleweight of these two, he's going to be the shorter guy. He's going to be the guy with the shorter reach. And while the 2004 idea of the stereotypical Hawaiian brawler is very outmoded at this point, Soriano is a little bit of a throwback to that. Like he really is a guy that just has big power in both hands. And while he can throw other strikes, when the bullets start flying, he really just bites down on the mouth guard, and throws punches. He's a better wrestler than he gets credit for, at least offensively. And he doesn't get enough credit for it because it will often go underused. Like he kind of reminds me a little of, Ray Cooper and all the, the good stuff he got done over in PFL. Just huge question marks about both these guys. Soriano, I'm not his coach. I'm not privy to his training camps. And if there's anywhere where you could do this, doing it at Extreme Couture within an easy drive of the UFC PI is where you would want to do it. But by the eyeball test, Puna Soriano does not look like a guy who could make 170 easily. He is a big, burly, muscular guy who's not that fat. Like, I'm interested to see if 6 months will be enough for him to really retool his physique to that extent, or he's just going to come in really, really drawn, having cut too much water, which would not be a good sign. With Baeza, I mean, the question is, he got knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights, and in the one he didn't get knocked out, he got slapped around pretty good. His defensive liabilities have been laid bare. And he's been gone for 2 years, due in part to some injuries. So you wonder what version of him you're getting. I do not envy the people that had to put a line on this fight because I have no idea. But I'm leaning Soriano. He's an underdog here, and I'm not sure I fully get that. Soriano could certainly land a punch of the kind that, Chaos Williams did on him, but I'm adopting a wait and see attitude until I see what Soriano looks like on the scale and in the cage at 170. So give me Baeza to win this fight and maybe go through a couple scares early, but pull ahead late. He's not the most durable guy in the world, but if Soriano is starting to get tired by the 6 or 7 minute mark, that's good news for Baeza. Give me Baeza to win a nip and tuck decision here, but I have no confidence in this pick. How could you?
That was a bait switch. I thought you were taking Soriano, and then last thing you switch it over. How could you have any confidence in either one of these fighters? I'm not that high on either one. Soriano, southpaw, pocket boxer, pretty quick hands. He's accurate, but too much single strikes, too much loading up. He has really good power. I mean, his left against Dusko Torovic, and he couldn't miss. He also kept landing the left against Dolce Luambula, though he becomes very predictable. I mean, against Stolfus, he kept swinging the same overhand, loading up too much. I like when he mixes kicks in with his combos. The problem is he's one of these guys, he's willing to eat a shot to land one, and he's got a hell of a chin, but like he's telegraphed so much lately in his last 2 fights. He's a solid wrestler. He's got some good entries, good against the second level and driving through the hips, showing how strong he is by grabbing a leg and slamming his opponents. He also got some foot sweeps. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though, and he was subbed by Dustin Stolfus. If he gets on top, he's got good ground and pound. But obviously, you said the big mystery is how he's going to be at 170. The one thing about him, he's a big, burly kind of guy, but he also had, he was a little soft in the stomach stuff. So, it might be one of these guys where it might be beneficial moving down. He wasn't he wasn't undersized. I don't think. He may have been a little shorter, but like I don't think he wasn't. Oh, I'm not as strong as the middleweights or anything like that. He's probably one of the stronger middleweights there is. But he's one of these guys. Like he's got some area where you can cut some weight. Baeza again, dude. Like who knows? The guy's been out, and then he's so inconsistent. One fight he looks great, the next fight he looks trash. He's a good athlete. He moves well. He's a pretty solid boxer. Works with Chris jab, nice 1-2, pretty accurate. Got some plus power. Really good kicking game. Some really good calf kicks. But you mentioned it's his defense. Stands tall, lacks head movements, doesn't like to be pressured. He can wrestle. He's got pretty decent entries, good ground and pound. Not a huge submission threat. He only has one sub, though he almost caught Chaos Williams with a heel hook. But you have to worry about his chin. I mean, he's been cracked many times, and now he's going against a big puncher. I'm not high on either. I keep flip-flopping this one. Man, yeah. I have no confidence in my pick. I know Baeza is the better athlete. I know that. Even with Soriano moving down, I think he's a better athlete. And I think he has a higher upside, even though I don't think either one of these guys' upside is very high. Soriano, though, I just keep thinking of that defense of Baeza, and Soriano could be losing the whole time and then just land one big shot. Man, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna go with Baeza. No, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go with Soriano. I say Soriano catches him. I'll say Soriano knocks him out in the first round.
All right. We have, I think, our first disagreement of the card, and neither of us is really doubling down on this one.
wait, the recap show where the other one can taunt the other one for being an idiot.
Middleweights are up next. The first of 3 middleweight fights on the main card here, as Julian Marquez takes on Zachary Reese. Marquez, the 34-year-old, now fighting out of Colorado, is 9-4 overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 2-fight losing streak dating back 2 full years. He got knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez in June of 2022, came back in March of last year and got knocked out in the second round by Marc-Andre Barriault. So a little over a year later, he is back in the cage, hoping not to go on a 3-fight losing streak, hoping not to go below 500 in the UFC. In order to avoid those things, he will have to get past Zach Reese. 30-year-old Texan is 6-1 overall. He's 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of the Contender Series. He made his debut last December at UFC on ESPN, Dariush versus Sarukian, where Cody Brundage needed just like 90 seconds or so to slam him, hurt him, and finish him with some probably unnecessary punches, as Reese was done after the takedown. So Reese looking to get back from that inauspicious debut. The odds are close on this one, so I'll quiz you, Keith. The favorite is -120. The underdog +100 or +105, just barely in the plus money. Who are they?
I think Marquez is the favorite.
You're correct. Marquez is the slight favorite, -120. Reese around +105.
I'm on a roll, my man. I don't think I got a roll yet.
This is a fight against, or a fight between someone in Marquez that I think he's already reached his relatively modest ceiling. He's around 500 in the UFC. He has pretty fun. He called for a date with Miley Cyrus.
That was like his peak.
Yeah, he has pretty fun fights each time out. He's a mid-card filler, and I don't mean that as an insult. The UFC needs him. The UFC has 600 fighters, and about 500 of them are just another guy. Julian Marquez is one of those, and if you're just another guy that is actually memorable for a few things, like a fun comeback win, a funny post-fight speech, that being just another guy plus is even better, because you probably get a little more rope when you're on a losing streak, which he is. But he's a guy that he's listed at 6'2" and 185 pounds, but he feels short and stocky. And I think it's just because he's a guy with broad shoulders and short arms, who makes it even worse by being a brawler where everything's coming in, curving and hooking. He does have good power. And his best win, the one that's kind of sparked the Miley Cyrus moment, was a come from behind. Well, not come from behind, but he and Maki Patola were having just a brainless brawl, and they were both tired in the third round, and he turned to his sneaky and underrated submission game and tapped him out. That's brilliant stuff. All three of his wins in the UFC are by submission, and nothing on his highlight reel other than those submissions would lead you to believe he's capable of that, because he just looks like the purest brawler when he's out there. But especially when he was still at Glory MMA and Fitness, James Krause would just yell the right thing at him, a switch would flip in his head, and he'd bring out some pretty slick groundwork. Like, that's a fun fighter to have on your cards. But if you ask me if he's a future top 15 guy at 185, no. I'm betting my house no. Whereas Zach Reese, even though he's old to be this new in the UFC and he looked absolutely horrible in his debut, he's got more upside. I'd be less surprised if you told me Zach Reese is a ranked middleweight 3 years from now than Julian Marquez. Reese is a big guy for the division. And leaving aside, like his record on paper where he does have more knockouts than submissions, and kind of like Marquez, leaving aside what a lot of his regional highlight reel looks like, his best skill, the one that will translate to wins over UFC level fighters, if anything does, is that he is a good sneaky grappler who uses his long arms to good advantage there. He's been good at snatching front headlocks, just getting those long arms around people's neck quick and putting an end to things. In scrambles in transition, he's good at taking the back, and part of it is just using his long limbs to kind of get that in motion when his opponent isn't expecting it yet. He looked terrible against Brundage, but again, that thing was over, just kind of got speared through the ribs with the shoulder. I don't know how many times out of 10 he beats Cody Brundage if they fight 10 times, but I think it probably only looks like that once. He's a slight underdog against Marquez here. And part of this might be me just making a homer pick. Like, he trains at War Training Center. His main training partner is Trevin Giles, his coach, Jeremy May, and I consider a friend. But I do think he has a little spark of upside.
Has he taken your classes that you teach when Alex Barrono's not around?
Oh my goodness.
Because that matters. I need to know that information. If he's taking those classes, he's got,
I've been getting them to toughen up his ribs. Like, I pick him up and slam him. Yeah. I like Jeremy. Like, I like Alex a lot, but if Jeremy's gym was 5 miles away and Alex's was 30, I might train with Jeremy. Like, part of it is that, Alex is real close to me. At any rate, I don't know if Zach Reese is a future top 15 guy either. He's not really old, but he's really old to only have like 6 pro fights or 7 pro fights. And a lot of them, even as he was like wrecking people in Fury, felt like a guy who was kind of learning his trade as he went. Like, he still is a developing guy. I don't know how much time he has to develop, but I like this fight for both of these guys. It's a winnable fight for both. It should be a whole hell of a lot of fun. Both of them are willing strikers with underratedly good submission games, but Marquez is a few years older. He's a lot older in terms of wear and tear. Like, he's been in a bunch of wars, win or lose. He's had like that serious major biceps tear that kept him on the shelf for like 2 years. Give me Reese to win this one as the fresher guy, just in terms of general physical wear and tear, as the bigger natural middleweight, and the guy who is more likely to have made improvements in his game since the last time we saw him. I'm tempted to say decision, but considering that both of these guys probably see the grappling as the secret edge they have over the other, I could see Marquez engaging late and Reese turning it around on him. So give me Reese by 3rd round submission here in the slight upset.
The big surprise I have is that this is this high up the card. Like, the whoever picks the order of the fights, like, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, why is this fight? Like, if this was the opener of the card, like, that wouldn't surprise me either. Instead, it's really high up the card. I'm not dogging it. Just I like just to have some rhyme or reason why fights get picked where they are. Julian Marquez, he's a big bruising type guy. You mentioned it. Like he is a brawler. That is true. He stalks his foes. He likes to get in the pocket. He throws bombs. He throws some hard, tight hooks. Not much defense. Doesn't avoid strikes very well. He throws some of these like thudding hard kicks. He likes to grind chest to chest. Got some mean, dirty boxing. He will wrestle. He's not a traditional NCAA level wrestler, so not close. But he's one of these guys who just kind of gets a scramble going, and he's got some hard ground and pound. I mean, it was forever ago, but he did sub Darren Stewart. He will gas out because of his style. He gassed out bad against Marc-Andre Barrios. And then you got to worry about his chin. I mean, he was knocked out bad against Gregorio Rodriguez. And for a guy who doesn't really, care, he was knocked out bad by Gregorio Rodriguez. He also got knocked out by Marc-Andre Barrios in back-to-back fight. And a guy that it's always been part of his game, willing to eat one to land one. So he has to have his chin. Reese, he's a long, lengthy fighter. He can fight at both stances. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He got some solid pop. Defensively, he's got a little tall man's defense, chin straight in the air, back straight up. I like his kicking game. He's a good kick everywhere. I haven't seen too much of his offensive wrestling. That in what I've seen, he doesn't seem like a wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though. But he's a submission threat, as you mentioned. He's got 2 subs. Does move really well off his back. Like your old school grappling guy, tossing up arm bars off his back, but he threatens with it. I'm with you. There's a reason why this is a really close fight. I have no clue on this one. I'm not very high on either guy. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go with Reese. I mean, he's younger, he's longer, he should have the better cardio. I agree. I think he might lose the early round and then kind of rally in the second and third with more volume. Give me Reese by split decision.
Next up at UFC Louisville is another middleweight matchup, this one featuring Bruno Ferreira and Dustin Stoltzfus. Ferreira, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 11-1 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought back in January at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2, knocking out Phil Hawes in the closing seconds of the first round. He will look to extend that to 2 wins in a row, start up another streak like the one he had to begin his career. Opposing him in that endeavor will be Stoltzfus. The 32-year-old American by way of Germany is 15-5 overall. He's 2-4 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of the Contender Series. He did win in his last appearance. He tapped out Soriano in the second round back at UFC on ESPN, Dariush versus Sarukian in December. So he's looking for his second win in a row as well. He is not favored to get it. Ferreira minus 275, Stoltzfus plus 225. I'll say this. Stoltzfus is just 2-4 in the UFC right now, but he's done better than I expected. When he debuted, he just looked so overmatched and so out of his depth. I thought, not only is this guy going to wash out of the UFC in 2 or 3 fights, he might actually get hurt really bad at this. He made it to the UFC because he was the other guy in the cage when Joe Pyfer had his like weird, freakish injury. Yeah. But just as a guy who had fought at welterweight quite a bit on the way up, he seemed undersized at middleweight. He seemed unathletic. And while he was a decent grappler or decent wrestler and good grappler on the regional, like European central, like German Central European scene, at least against the Rodolfo Vieiras and Gerald Meerschaerts of the UFC, that just wasn't going to get traction. But he's won 2 of his last 3, and he's shown a little bit more life on the feet. He's still slow. He's still undersized, but he has a little bit of pop, and he defends himself reasonably well. And it's gotten him into positions to actually ply his ground game against an overmatched fighter in Dwight Grant and a somewhat decent fighter in Puna Soriano. I don't think that's going to help him much against Bruno Ferreira. I adopted a wait and see attitude towards this guy coming out of the Contender Series. I said, when someone's coming out of Brazil or Eastern Europe or any less well-regulated area, and they have a ton of first-round knockouts, and they're built like he was built, I want to wait through a couple of fights and see what they look like after getting to meet UFC level anti-doping. He has still looked fine. Like, he knocked out fellow freak of nature Gregory Rodriguez. He knocked out Phil Hawes, and while Phil Hawes has become kind of easy to knock out, there's still the question of not getting knocked out by him on your way there. He lost to Nursultan Ruzaboyev, but it turns out the Ruzaboyev is really, really good. So yeah. I still think Ferreira is a somewhat limited fighter. He's built like a tank, but he's not very tall. He's got short reach. And while, again, he looks like you would expect a fighter to look in a movie, he doesn't bring the level of athleticism you would expect from looking at him. Like, he's a good athlete, but he's not a jump out the gym athlete. I still think he's going to be good enough to get past Stoltzfus. He's going to be faster. He's going to hit much harder. He's very aggressive. We're talking about a guy that's coming into his 13th pro fight. He's only been to the second round twice, and he's only been past the first minute of the second round once, and that was in like his second or third professional fight. He's used to getting his work done quickly. If Stoltzfus lasts to the end of the first round and Ferreira is breathing with his mouth open, we'll know something about him. I mean, we already know that about Stoltzfus. However long Stoltzfus lasts in the UFC, it's going to be he's going to have to take the Gerald Meerschaert path. He's going to have to survive against more offensively potent strikers, wait for him to get tired, worn out, make a mistake, and take advantage. Like, however many more times Stoltzfus wins in the UFC, that's how it's going to happen. And if he gets that done against Ferreira, then I'll know that much about Ferreira. But I'm thinking Ferreira passes that test. I expect him to be all over Stoltzfus. Like, his kicks are hard, his punches are hard, and Stoltzfus, while he's gotten better defending himself on the feet, still has a bunch of bad habits. I expect Ferreira to hit him hard, early, often. Maybe have to finish this on the ground, but I think it's over in the first round. Give me Bruno Ferreira by first round knockout.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things you said about Stoltzfus. Like, the guy is a much better fighter than we originally thought he was going to be, and he's been pretty successful. The guy can fight at both stances. He can be a good output fighter from the outside. He loves his overhand right. He throws some fun spinning attacks. He's got some pop. I mean, he dropped Puno Soriano with one shot. He's got a really good kicking game, though he also gets his legs beat up too. He doesn't check leg kicks. He will wrestle. He's a much better wrestler than I originally thought. He's got solid takedown defense. He's got some slick back takes. I mean, like what he did to Davey Grant. He's got 8 submissions. He got a knee bar in one fight. He got a leg lock. He got a twister. He just subbed Puno Soriano. I am worried about his chin, and I mean, this is a big guy that can knock him out. And he was recently knocked out by Abbas Magomedov, so that's obviously a concern. Bruno Ferreira, I like what I said. I mean, southpaw, but he also fights out of both stances. He sets his shots well with feints, and he's all about being a power puncher. I mean, he's got huge power, eight knockouts. He just explodes into his shot. His short right hook from the southpaw stance is probably his lead right hook is probably his best punch. He does keep his chin high in the air. He's open to leg kicks. He's an underrated grappler. I mean, he's a judo black belt. He uses judo against Phil Hawes, which I thought was a good sign. He's got good entries. He's a submission threat. He's got 3 subs on his record. He showed that he can get it from the bottom too when Gregor Rodriguez took him down. And Gregor Rodriguez is a really good grappler himself. Obviously, the way he fights, his cardio is questionable. Like, if Stoltzfus can survive an early onslaught, this guy's never been past the second minute of the second round. So if he can survive this, and that's kind of the avenue of victory for Stoltzfus. Like, that's his kind of way he wins a lot too. Like, wear him out, start taking him down. I am also worried a little bit about Ferreira's chin, as he was Huzabayev knocked him out, but like you said, Huzabayev is a really good fighter. I think the line should be closer than you said, especially if Stoltzfus can close the distance and really wrestle. I'm with you, though. I'm still on with Ferreira. I think he hits really hard. I think Stoltzfus has a questionable chin. Give me Ferreira by first round knockout. Keep that knockout streak going.
Third from the top at UFC on ESPN 57 is a bantamweight matchup between Raul Rosas Jr. and Ricky Turcios. These two had been scheduled to fight on February 24th at the UFC Mexico, the Royval versus Moreno card. The fight fell apart during fight week when Raul Rosas Jr. fell ill. There was a brief controversy as the two kind of leveled accusations at each other, and the UFC tried to announce the fight being moved, and Turcios said, I haven't signed anything. However, we got there. The fight has now been remade 3.5 months later. We previewed that at the time. Keith, obviously a few months have elapsed. We've gone from Mexico City to Louisville, Kentucky, so there's a difference in altitude, but has anything changed enough for you to change your pick on that fight?
I'm not going to change my pick, but I wasn't very confident in my pick to begin. I'll say, build the suspense, kill the suspense, I should say. I picked Turcios in a pretty good upset based on being in Mexico, based on Rojas gassing in the past, Turcios being a guy that wins by volume and cardio and beyond the gas. So changing from the high altitude to Kentucky makes me a lot less confident. And then also Rojas getting a little bit older. I mean, obviously age is youth is on his side, but on the same sense, inexperience and stuff, he's got a little more time to grow in his skill. So I'm less confident, though I wasn't very confident to begin with. I'm still going to take Turcios. There's so many fights you can do tape study. There's 14 fights, to get tape study. This one we already did, so I'll stay with Turcios in an upset. But I think the time favors Rojas.
I'm with you. I also picked Turcios going into that one. My biases are well known and laid bare here, but the variables that have changed in between do favor Rosas, because I think I said it at the time. I have the feeling that Rosas withdrew from that fight because he was having a miserable time with the weight cut and the altitude, and had the feeling that he might be about to lose. So at any rate, I'm still going with Turcios, but my confidence is reduced as well. The UFC Mexico main card powers on with a bantamweight matchup between teenage phenom Raul Rosas Jr. and Ricky Turcios. Rosas, the now 19-year-old American-born, sometime Mexican resident, is 8-1 overall. He's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out, knocked out Terrence Mitchell in under a minute at Noche UFC last September. That allowed him to bounce back from his first career loss, which took place at UFC 287 last April, where he was outlasted and kind of just outfought to a righteous unanimous decision loss by Christian Rodriguez. He'll try to make it 2 in a row and reestablish himself as someone to watch for the next decade in the UFC at the expense of Turcios. Turcios, 30-year-old Houston native. He's 12-3 overall. He is also 2-1 since trying every which way to get into the UFC. He fought in the very first episode of Dana White's Contender Series. It may have been the first fight, because the guy that beat him, Boston Salmon, was the first fighter ever signed out of Dana White's Contender Series. So yeah, he was there for the very first episode of the Contender Series. He's, of course, the winner of Tough 29. He also was a high-level contender in Fury. While he is not Mexican, he is El Salvadoran on one side, I think Filipino on the other, fluent in Spanish. If he wins and gets on the mic afterwards, believe me, they're going to love him. But the odds makers do not favor him to be getting on the mic afterwards, as Raul Rosas Jr. is a prohibitive favorite. He's minus 275. Turcios plus 220 on the comeback. I love Ricky Turcios. I know him personally. I think he's an absolutely delightful dude. He's a hell of a lot of fun to watch as a fighter. He is ideal as a foil for Raul Rosas Jr. Because, I mean, if Rosas wins this is his best UFC win so far. Turcios is a tough winner. He's a guy above 500 in the same division. The problem is, Turcios, to me, is a little bit like a bantamweight Paddy Pimblett, where his best feature is his ground game. And it's not a lights out ground game. We're not talking about Abu Dhabi Ricky here, but he's a long, lanky, tricky, scrambly guy who's a better wrestler than you think he is, and just a good grappler. That's really his best skill set, but he just wants to be in fun fights and engages in wild brawls on the feet to his detriment. That's bad news against a guy like Raul Rosas Jr., I think. Raul Rosas Jr., obviously, he's a prodigy on the ground, but his striking game is developing, and it seems to be developing quickly. He has good physical tools for it. He is a big bantamweight. I don't know if he's still going to be making bantamweight when he's 25 or 28 years old, but he's a big bantamweight, not just in terms of height and wingspan, but got muscle on his frame. Like, we joke about him like missing his high school prom to fight in the UFC and stuff, but if you saw a dude that looked like this walking down the halls of your high school, you'd be a little intimidated. I like this for Rosas wherever this goes. Like if they stay on the feet, Rosas hits harder. He's not defensively perfect, but he's a more disciplined striker than Tercios is. If it goes to the ground, Tercios is a little more freewheeling and scrambly, where Rosas is going to be bigger, more positionally sound. It's hard for me to see like plausible routes to victory for my guy Ricky here, because even the great equalizer that we've mentioned in almost every fight, the 7,000 foot thing, yeah, like Tercios has been training at altitude for a while, but he has decent 3-round cardio. We've not really seen too much reason to be concerned about Raul Rosas Jr.'s cardio. I mean, he got tired in the Christian Rodriguez fight, but I think he would have lost that fight anyway, even if he were like fresh in the third. Give me Raul Rosas Jr. to get a pretty one-sided decision here over Ricky Tercios, where he kind of gets the better of it everywhere.
Yeah, so I just looked up what was the first Dana White Contender Series fight. Yeah, just had me curious. It was that was on the card. That wasn't the very first fight. The very first fight was Joby Sanchez versus Manny Vasquez. With Joby Sanchez, wow. Unanimous decision. But while you were previewing this, I was thinking about Rojas. Being dude's just now 19. He's fighting his fourth fight in the UFC. He's 19, which is absurd.
He's going to blow up all the records for number of fights by this birthday or that birthday. Like we're thinking your Sage Northcutts, your Macy Barbers, John Joneses. Yeah.
As long as he doesn't, get some serious injury where he's out for a year and a half or something like that. But yeah, if he stays somewhat healthy, he's fighting 2-3 times a year. Yeah. And what keeps winning, he doesn't get cut or something like that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was watching there was like a press conference for guys that fight on UFC 300, and they were asking Jim Miller about UFC 400, making a joke. Raul Rosas could actually really fight on UFC 400 one day.
Oh, easily. It's going to be like 6 or 7 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. And he'd be like 26. Like he could fight on UFC 500. Like, I'm not betting on that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now at that point he'd be probably
in his early
37, 30. Oh, I think
he wouldn't be. The UFC does 12 or 13 numbered pay-per-views a year. They're going to be 6 or 7 years apart.
200.
So 14 years from now, he'll be 33.
Jeez. Oh, yeah, that's crazy. Dude who knows? Maybe he has a Jim Miller career. He can fight at UFC 600. Yeah, that's crazy. So there's a lot of. I mean, the dude's 19, so every time you break down this guy, you have to put that like star. Like he's just becoming a man now. Now, again, I went on this rant last time. I understand that like 17-year-olds like storm the beaches of Normandy. Like,
yeah,
I understand that. So, but he's at an age where who knows? His life is just starting. We could see a completely different person than we've seen his last 3 fights. What I've liked about him, he's got fast hands. He's a pretty strong guy who hasn't even reached his strength years. He showed in his last fight that he seems like he's coming into his power. Now, he needs to improve his striking. His technique is still very raw, but he has good volume. He can fight out of both stances. He will swing wildly. His volume dropped greatly in the Christian Rodriguez fight. He throws a lot of kicks, but they're kind of ineffective. He likes flying attacks, Superman punches, knees, kind of like, it's kind of a way to like close the distance without, a little quicker. He can wrestle, but he struggled to take Christian Rodriguez down. If he gets on top, he's got good top game, advances position on the ground. He's a good BJJ practitioner, mean back takes, mean ground and pound. He is a submission artist. He's got 5 subs. He almost got a Sula stretch in one of his UFC bouts. He does chase submissions that aren't there, though, in loose position. He also isn't a good defensive wrestler. But the biggest concern is, one, as you mentioned, his size. Like, I'm always worried about the weight cut for this guy because he's still growing. He's 19,
I mean, would it be that shocking if when he's 26 years old, he is a jacked lightweight?
No.
Like, he's not going to get too much taller, but he's got the frame that he can carry more muscle easily.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But the biggest concern is with, the weight class and everything and his age and what we've seen against Christian Rodriguez, him gassing out. Like, he gassed bad in that fight. Mm-hmm. Turquios, I'm going to – you said his best part of his game is his ground game. I'm going to disagree with that. Okay. I'm not saying his striking is the best part of the game, but his pressure is. I mean, he wins solely on volume. He's a very unorthodox striker, constantly switching stances, herky-jerky kind of type fighter who at times would just hold his ground instead of allowing his opponent to step back. But then he had like weird fight. He was like clapping at his opponents and not doing, wasting volume. But like I'm talking about when he was on the Ultimate Fight show where he had his like best performance, the best run of his career. He was just beating guys with volume. Opponents have a hard time picking up his striking due to all the crazy things he do. The way he moves is kind of crazy. It's, unusual. It takes them a little bit of time. He does a lot of up and down feints, which you don't see. I think his hands are, somewhat quick. He attacks with combinations. His check right hook from the southpaw stance is kind of his best strike. He blends punches and kicks together well. He loves throwing down in the pocket for a brawl. He kind of trusts his chin too much. I think, like you said, it's also what you said, trying to get a bonus, to entertain the crowd, which is not a good idea if you're the less skilled fighter. But he's, to his credit, he's got a chin. I mean, go back to the Danny Ortega fight. Ortega was teeing off on him, and he was eating fights. He's a guy, when he gets rocked, he doesn't back forward. He actually reacts by moving forward and pressing the action even more. He can land takedowns, does pretty well. Like he's deceiving though when you look at it. You don't think he's a guy that would like blast through your hips, but he will. And he chains takedowns together well. Good at winning scrambles. Good at just kind of keeping the hips moving and making stuff happen. But he's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, he was taken down multiple times on the Ultimate Fighter show. He was taken down 6 times by Brady Easton. He was taken down 7 times by Kevin Natividad in that last fight. He's a submission threat off his back. Very active at tossing up submissions. He also has uses subs to kind of create space to try to get on top. Best strength is cardio, and cardio is, to him, is one of these guys. It's a tool. If Rojas takes him down and works him on top, that is the best avenue of victory, I think, for Rojas. Even though he has a striking advantage, but being on top, using his size, I think it'd be really good for him. I'm not very high on Tercios, and I want Rojas to be good. He obviously, of the two fighters, has a way bigger upside of these two guys. I think he batters Tercios early on the feet, maybe from the top position. But you know what? I keep thinking about that gas tank, and I haven't seen it fixed yet. I'm going to go the opposite, man. I'm going to go with big upset. I think Tercios going to weather the storm. I think he's going to take over. I think it's going to be one of these like veteran victories where that veteran dog is still in the fight and still hanging on. Is it like a Gerald Mershot type fight or Darren Elkins type fight where he's the less skilled fighter, but he's crafty and he's pressing a 19-year-old and beat him the mental game. And I think the volume basically gasses Rojas on, and Tercios starts winning the second round, starts winning the third. I guess even see like a late submission for him. But I'll say Rojas makes it to decision, but he drops the last 2 rounds and loses. I'll say really close. I'll say a split decision loss. Give me turnstiles by split decision.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Louisville, a light heavyweight clash between former title challenger Dominic Reyes and Dustin Jacoby. Reyes, the 34-year-old Californian, 12-4 overall. He is 6-4 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that he won his first 6 fights upon signing and has since lost 4 in a row. The other bad news is that the most recent of those losses was over a year and a half ago. He last appeared in November of 2022 at UFC 281, where he got knocked out in about 90 seconds by Rayanne Spann. Prior to that, he had knockout losses to Jiri Prochazka and Jan Blachowicz. And prior to that, the beginning of his losing streak was, of course, his very close, even controversial decision loss to John Jones at UFC 247, where a good number of observers thought he deserved to win the fight. However, he didn't win. He hasn't won since, and he is looking to snap a 4-fight losing streak here against a fighter in Jacoby who has lost 3 of his last 4 himself. 36-year-old Illinois native fighting out of Colorado is 19-8-1 overall. He's 7-5-1 across 2 different stints in the UFC. He's 7-3-1 since joining this most recent time as an alum of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. He popped back into the UFC, went undefeated in his first 7 fights back, but since then, again, he's lost 3 of his last 4, including his last outing, which was at UFC 296 in December, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Alonzo Menefield. So Jacoby looking to turn around his fortunes as well. And he is pretty heavily favored to do so. Jacoby's minus 220, Reyes plus 170. I mentioned before that because of the weird time distortion spent, occasioned by that especially the first 6 months or so of COVID, things that happened before the middle of 2020 feel a lot longer ago than they were to me. And unfortunately, that includes Dominic Reyes being any good. It feels like so long ago that he took John Jones to the wire, even though I was there. Like, I covered that one live. It was here in Houston.
Well,
it's hard for me to believe that he's like a couple years younger than Jacoby. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. And you know what? It's never good, but who's he lost to? He took John Jones to the limit, the best fighter in the world. Then he got knocked out by future champ Blachowicz, future champ Prochazka, and got knocked out by Rayanne Spann, who may be too inconsistent to ever like really make it to the top, but in terms of weapons, he's as dangerous a guy as there is in that division. Dominic Reyes is a guy that just can't catch a break, and it's because he's in one of those divisions where light heavyweight is shallow. It always has been. Even when it was the glamour division, it was shallow. Even when the UFC had Couture and Ortiz and Liddell knocking around, you look at who the 10th best guy in the division was, and it wasn't pretty. So what that means for a guy like Dominic Reyes is once you've been to the top, you'd never get a break. Dominic Reyes couldn't lose enough fights that they throw him in there against some dude, just another dude coming in off the Contender Series. And unfortunately, he might be fighting for his job here. Who knows? Hell, like with the long layoffs he's had and the different kinds of injuries he's had, he's an old 34. I don't know what his mind is like, but there's a chance he just retires and says, this isn't for me anymore. I have no idea. He's a guy that still has tools. Like, despite the wear and tear, despite the injuries, at least the last couple times we saw him, he's still an outstanding athlete. He's a huge light heavyweight, and he's another of the guys that was a pretty good college football player. And with some of those, it's overstated what an A-plus athlete they are. But Reyes really does have MMA level athleticism. Like he had fast feet for a light heavyweight.
Yeah. Do you remember when he said that he was the best athlete that John Jones ever fought, and people flipped out and they're like, he fought Olympians? And I'm like, no, not saying he's like most accomplished athlete, but like the way he fights is pure athleticism. I think it was a true statement.
I completely agree. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, Reyes, like, just big, fast feet.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Other than like Vitor Belfort, like that might be the only other guy that you could argue,
Yeah,
pure athleticism.
But at the time Vitor fought him, I'm not sure that was even the case anymore. It was a pretty old Vitor.
Yeah.
Like, after
it wasn't a threat. It wasn't
USADA,
considered. Yeah. It wasn't the guy running through Tank Abbott, or wasn't the juiced up TRT, spinning wheel kick guys.
Yeah, like Reyes, like fast hands. Just, this feels weird to say because these are some of the top athletes in the world in their sport, but not everybody that's 6'4", 6'5", and 205 pounds just has the kind of balance and hand-eye coordination as a Dominic Reyes. He's just a fantastic athlete, or was. And everything kind of ran off that. Like, he was as good a wrestler as he was because he was such a good athlete. His striking was as devastating as it was because of his athleticism. Like, not to say he was unskilled, but he sort of built a game around the physical gifts that he had. What's really abandoned him, though, at least in his recent run leading up to a couple of years ago, the durability is gone. Like, he was in a war with John Jones. Whether you think Jones won 3 rounds, you think Reyes won 3 rounds, there are a few people that think one or the other guy won 4 rounds. Like, Jones hit him plenty. He went through wars with hard-hitting guys like Volkan Oezdemir, Owen St. Preux, Jared Cannonier that we'll be talking about. Like, that one was over pretty quickly. But Reyes used to be able to take a shot, to give a shot, and that has abandoned him. And that's a shame, because I think he would need to do that to get past Jacoby. Jacoby is sort of, he was such a pleasant surprise when he came back to the UFC through the Contender Series, and there was no reason to believe he was going to be any different. Like, he's the guy that looked mediocre in going 0-2 against mid-level UFC fighters. Then he popped up in World Series of Fighting and he lost to David Branch. And while David Branch looked like a world beater at the time, that hasn't aged well. He popped up in Bellator a few years later, and his ground game in particular was exposed as, like, Mo Lawal and John Salter just took him down easily despite being much smaller and ran him over on the ground. There was no reason to believe that he'd pop up in the UFC and slug his way into the top 10, but that's exactly what he did. And it's interesting that he's lost 3 of his last 4, and it's not because he finally ran into people that were going to take him down and maul him on the ground. He just ran into other kickboxers who proved to be his equal. It's been kind of interesting to observe. Here, like, I would have favored him against the version of Reyes that got knocked out by Ryan Spann a year and a half ago. And there's no reason to believe that Reyes is better than that. If anything, Reyes is going to be worse than that. Jacoby is probably starting to fall off a little bit. He's 36 and has had a long MMA career as well as a long kickboxing career. He's probably starting to slow down, but I don't think Reyes is the guy that's going to take advantage of that. Reyes can't exchange shots with him on the feet. It'll end up looking like the Yuri Prochazka fight, where Reyes was doing pretty well against Prochazka, and Prochazka he hit him hardest and hit him last, and it was over. Jacoby could beat him that way. If Reyes tries to take Jacoby down, Jacoby's takedown defense has been proven to be pretty stout. Like, Iwan Kudalaba took him down a bunch of times and beat him up on the ground, but 1, that was 3 years ago, and 2, wrestling is the one thing that Kudalaba has at a really elite level. I don't see any good way forward for Reyes here. And that's even if he looks as good as I think he possibly could. If he looks diminished from how he did the last time we saw him, I think this gets even easier for Jacoby. Give me Jacoby to do what he does. I think he'll jab Reyes up. He's as tall and has as good a range, and he's jab is great. I could see him sawing at Reyes' legs with kicks. And once the openings start to come, Jacoby will go head hunting, and I think he's going to knock Reyes out. Give me Jacoby by 2nd round knockout here.
Yeah, Dominic Reyes, think about where he was when he fought John Jones, and he was this newcomer coming in, kind of came out of anywhere, ran through the division, was sitting at 11-0, just came off a knockout, first round knockout of Chris Weidman. He faces John Jones, and he's a big underdog, and he gives John Jones to my opinion, other than the stupid Matt Hamill fight, his hardest fight to date. That's including Gustafsson's fight. That's including Daniel Cormier fight, and everyone in between. And then John Jones leaves the division. He was like crowned the champion. Like he was the guy. I remember when he fought against Jan Blachowicz. He was supposed to be Jan Blachowicz. He was supposed to be the guy. It was almost like he was defending the title when they fought for the title. If you told me that guy 5 years from now would be in a co-main event, I would have been like, oh man, the guy's like trying to win back his title or something, like someone upset him. I wouldn't think, oh no, he's fighting a co-main event of a fight night, being a 2-1 underdog to Dustin Jacoby, who was out of the UFC at that time.
And he hasn't won again since then.
And he hasn't won again, which is
I think John Jones is the heavyweight champion he's defending, and that's the reason that Reyes is in the co-main event. Like he's defending the light heavyweight title or something. Yeah,
it has a Buster Douglas feel if Buster Douglas didn't beat Mike Tyson. If Buster Douglas lost a split decision, and then like Buster Douglas never really had another moment again in his career. Yeah, that's how I feel about Dominic Reyes. And then when you look, and the guy's already 34, like I still think like, oh, he can turn around. He's 34. No, it's light heavyweight, so like he still has time. But man, it's now or never, and I wanted him to be good. I thought he beat John Jones. I scored it for him. I have to watch it again, and I remember thinking it might be watching it live. It might have been a little bit of I didn't expect this, and now I'm scoring it for him kind of case. So I'd really want to watch it again. But regardless, I think that was the toughest one that John Jones ever faced, and think about this: those two guys, John Jones and Dominic Reyes, fought each other. John Jones has fought one time since, and he's got more wins than Dominic Reyes has since that moment. I mean, I remember standing there and talking about John Jones and Dominic Reyes and being like, if they fight again, is Dominic Reyes going to come in as the betting favorite? Yeah. And now John Jones, moving up to heavyweight champion of the world, baddest man of the planet, whatever you want to say. And the other guy's fighting Dustin Jacoby. It's just a weird world we live in. Let's talk about like the brilliant Dominic Reyes we saw. I mean, southpaw, incredible athlete, elusive, great movement, was springing at his opponents, counter-striking, good variety. His straight left was fantastic. He was using movement really well to counter. He could land while backing up. I mean, I remember Chris Weidman trying to like pursue him, and he was just backing up and picking him apart as he's coming in. I mean, step back counter, flattened OSP, flattened Weidman, had power in both hands, both legs. But what we've seen recently, we see a guy who's counter-striking, overthrowing his shots, loading up. I mean, against Ryan Spann, he was loading up, trying to end the fight with one shot, and he's lost some speed. That's the thing. He lost some speed. He became a very hittable, stationary target. Jan Blachowicz and Jure Prochazka both teed off on him because he wasn't moving. His chin seems like it's gone. Ryan Spann dropped him with a jab, because he likes to straight, as his opponents come at him, and he kind of moves. He moves back and likes to like counter. He can get pressed back to the cage because of that. One area was so impressive against John Jones is how well he did against the clinch against John Jones. I mean, John Jones murders people inside that, and he did well there. Yeah, he's never been much of an offensive wrestler, but he's got a couple takedowns in the UFC. He showed strong takedown defense against Chris Weidman and John Jones. He loved using his height to land some downward elbows similar to Travis Brown. If taken down, he sprung up really quick against Weidman, against Oosthuizen, and even like Jeremy Kimball early in his career. We haven't seen him in this run where he's losing. We haven't really seen much of his grappling. He gassed a little against OSP, but he also got a late finish in that. I said before, like he's all athleticism and speed, and that could fade overnight. That is what's concerned. I think that is completely gone. And I hope I'm wrong. Like I hope there's this like we're gonna have this like once in a lifetime turnaround. 2 years from now he's fighting for the title, and it's like, well, yeah, well, this stretch I had a bad back, or I wasn't this, or whatever. We have some story that none of us knew about. That's what I'm hoping. He's got a tough test. I mean, Justin Jacoby, he's a good kickboxer, technically sound. He's got good volume, very relaxed, very poised on his feet. He parries punches really well. He uses feints to set up his strikes really well. He loves to attack from different angles. Got a nice jab. He throws straight shots down the pipe. Doesn't really waste any. Just touches on lows when there's an opening. Perfect example of that is, he showed his power against Daniel John. He showed his power against Kenny Njoku, which is touching. Then when he had open, then he put him down. I like his calf kicks. I mean, go back to the Justin Ledet. It's been a while now, but the Justin Ledet, he beat Justin Ledet just throwing kicks, calf kicks, nothing else. I'm a little worried about his chin, though. I mean, he got hurt by Rizikhanov. He was hurt by, it looked like he was about to beat Alonzo Menifil in the last fight. Then Menifil drops him with a big shot late. He never really looks to wrestle, and he's got terrible takedown defense. Again, I want to be wrong about Reyes. I want him to be great. I'm all out on him. I think Jacoby works him. Jab, kicks. This is the chance, Jacoby's, he's been a long-time kickboxer. He's been in wars. His chin has been cracked. It's starting to crack a little bit. This could be the guy that Reyes puts out. I just think Reyes, overthrows, and I think Jacoby makes him pay. I think Jacoby might knock him out. Give me Jacoby with a counter. I think Jacoby knocks him out in the second round.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC on ESPN 57. It is a middleweight, high-level contenders clash between Jared Cannonier and Nasruddin Imavov. Cannonier, the 40-year-old Alaskan Texan by way of Alaska, by way of Arizona, is 17-6 overall. He is 10-6 in the UFC. Notably, he has competed across 3 different divisions. He joined as a short, stocky heavyweight, then dropped to light heavyweight, fighting people including Dominic Reyes, whom we just talked about. He is 7-2 since dropping to middleweight, with his only losses coming to former champ Robert Whittaker and then champ Israel Adesanya. Other than that, he's been kind of unstoppable, and he is on a 2-fight win streak since the Adesanya loss, those coming against Sean Strickland, who would go on to become a champion, and perennial top 10 fighter Marvin Vettori. The Vettori fight, his most recent appearance, was almost exactly a year ago in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 47 back in June. He will look to make it 3 wins in a row and show that even at age 40, he is not done as a title contender. In order to do so, he will have to get past Imavov. 29-year-old Russian by way of France is 13-4 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He did win in his last appearance. He appeared in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 235 back in February, taking a majority decision over Roman Dolidze. Prior to that, he fought twice last year, losing to Sean Strickland in January and having his fight with Chris Curtis interrupted kind of midway through thanks to an accidental clash of heads, ending in a no contest. So he's looking to put together a win streak of his own, finally make his way into the title picture this year. I'll quiz you on this one because the line is pretty close. The favorite is -140, the underdog +110. Who are they?
Cannonier is a favorite.
Imavov is your favorite. He's -140, Cannonier +110. Perhaps those calling on Imavov or calling for Imavov to win this one have heard the old axiom, or they've been shown the stats about what it looks like when there's a decade of age difference between 2 fighters in the UFC. It feels to me as though if there's anyone who could buck that trend, it is Cannonier, who just does not seem to age at all. It's this bizarre thing. Maybe there's something to those weird crystals he carries around. I don't know. But tell me how you see this one going. If Cannonier is going to make it to another title shot, it's go time. It needs to be this year, and it starts with beating Imavov. It feels like Imavov has more time, but I'm sure he doesn't want to wait. So who gets it done?
Oh man, this is intriguing because of Cannonier being out and his age and everything. It's really hard to have confidence. And Imavov's, he's kind of like a rising star in that division. He looks really good at sometimes. Looks like every time you start like really believing in him, he takes a step back. He's only 28, which is, fairly young in his prime years. Canada is tough, man, because he's that guy that no one's excited about. He's never been, a marketable guy. He's just got no personality. Even the way he fights, he's got a lot of stoppages, but like he's still like, you go back to like his Strickland fight was boring. His fight against Adesanya was very boring. I mean, he never got out of first gear in his fight for the title, and he's 40 years old and he's coming off an ACL tear. So, and then you ask him to come back, headline 5-round fight, and go against top 5 to top 10 guys in the world. He is best. Again, obviously, I'm going against what we last saw of him. So he is best when he's pressing the action. He's very physically strong. He can press his opponents back with his physicality. He's explosive. He hits hard. He has those just see the guy. The guy's he doesn't miss the gym. He's lifting. He's got massive legs. Generates a lot of power.
Does he have the lowest fat content in the UFC?
Oh, I'd have to think about. No,
he looks like an anatomical drawing.
No, who's our girl there? The girl with the
Ariane Carnelosi?
Yeah, the Carnelosi might be. He's up there though. I mean, he's hitting the gym, dude. And it's funny because he used to be a heavyweight, so he used to have that fat on him.
No, a quick aside. His UFC debut was, at this point, it was just over 9 years ago. It was a heavyweight. It was against Sean Jordan. Sean Jordan.
Yeah,
and,
Sean Jordan.
And Cannonier at the time. He was an LSU football player. Yeah, he was a defensive lineman. That, I think, is the beefiest fight in the history of the UFC between two fighters that were not over 6 feet tall, and neither of them was Polynesian.
Yeah.
like that's the closest you could get to making like a fight between Justin Tafa and Tai Tuivasa with like no actual like Samoans or like Maoris in it. Yeah. Like those were just two squat, powerful heavyweights and both shockingly athletic compared to how they looked.
Yeah. And Canada hasn't had 1 ounce of.
He has no carbs since then.
Yeah.
He's had no carbs in 9 years.
Not a single like speck of sugar or anything since then. The guy he's ripped. He's got those, big legs that help him generate power. He sits on his punches. He throws thudding kicks. He can be low output at times. We saw him be gun shy against Rob Whittaker, even worse against Adesanya. He will go for takedowns. And if he gets on top, he's got scary ground and pound. I've compared it in the past to Derek Lewis. He just starts clubbing. I'm not too sure about his takedown defense. He showed good takedown defense against Jack Hermanson, but then also struggled with Derek Brunson's wrestling. But that was a long time ago. So Imavov, he's the guy that relies a lot on athleticism. He's a very athletic guy. He moves well. He uses, he's elusive. He uses his movement to kind of get people to chase. He wants to work at space. That's why he kind of struggled with Sean Strickland, because Strickland had success by just backing him up, continue to take the ground on him. He's a good striker. He's a counter striker. He's very calm and relaxed. He's got fast hands, nice snap on his shots. He likes to play the cat mouse game, get you to chase him. He got feedbacks and counters. He has plus power. He quickly knocked out Phil Halls, which again hasn't really aged well. But he also knocked out Ian Heinisch again. That didn't age well, and he keeps his hands low, which is concerning because he relies so much on countering and head movement. He can wrestle though. He's an underrated wrestler. He doesn't look to wrestle enough, but when he went to wrestle Chris Curtis, he took him down 3 times. When he commits, he's pretty relentless. He turns the corner on his takedown attempts. He's got good top control. He's got mean ground and pound if he's on top. He beat up Edmund Sabazian with ground and pound. He beat up Ian Heinisch with ground and pound. He has a submission threat. He jumped guillotine on Jordan Williams. Again, these are lower middleweight guys. No one really high up. But he showed good takedown defense against Ian Heinisch, against Roman Dolidze. The Cannonier that we last saw was really good. Where really Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker is the only guys that can beat him. Well, that might be the 2 best guys, at that time in the division. It's hard to pick a 40-year-old coming off knee surgery in a 5-round fight against a top contender. Like, I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm gonna say that he missed his window. Some bad luck, some aging. I'm gonna say Imavov's too fast for him. I think he's gonna his speed, his movement. It's going to be hard for Cannonier to kind of catch up to him. I see Imavov outpoints Cannonier from range for 25 minutes, and Imavov, a bit of a passing of the torch moment. Imavov wins the unanimous decision.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that. And again, like my thought was, if anyone can buck the age thing, it would be Cannonier, but that doesn't mean that I think it's the likeliest thing, especially as you mentioned, given that he had major surgery and we don't know exactly what he'll look like from there. I like the scouting report on both guys that you kind of threw out there. Imavov has had his ups and downs. Like, I was surprised that he was 5-3 in the UFC. I was expecting, 5-2 with one no contest in the UFC. I expected him to have more wins than that. And going back and kind of watching his fights, I still don't think he's had a single performance that really shows everything he can do. I don't know what Imavov's ceiling is, though. I mean, if he wins 2 more fights, he's probably in a title shot. But I still don't think he's laid out one fight that shows everything he can do to its fullest extent. I still think we're waiting for that one. Maybe Saturday is when we get it. Maybe it's going to take a Jared Cannonier to pull that out of him, because you pointed out he can wrestle. Like, kind of lost in the fact that he's been training in France for most of his career is that he is from Dagestan. He's not just Russian. He's a Dagestani who just ended up in France kind of through the randomness of life and professional fighting, and has made that his home.
He's got the beard. He's got to shave the top.
Yeah,
he got too much hair up top.
Well, he moved to France, and
that must be the France part.
I still think that Dagestan, country of like 4 or 5 million people, there's like one barber there, and all he has is a foreguard. So you go to you just get the same thing all around. You let it grow out for a couple months.
They have more hair in the chest than the head.
Yeah, but Imavov, you made a good point about like his composure. I think part of the reason maybe he hasn't put it all together into one consummate performance is that he has that MMA Factory thing where they're almost calm to a fault. You lay him out, no matter what their style is. If they're a Fernand Lopez guy, whether it's Cyril Gane, Nasruddin Imavov, Taylor Lapilus, who fights earlier in this card, they are all calm to a fault. Like, if you're mad at anything, it's like, you could take over this fight right now if you do more. Like, you're beating this guy, you're outclassing him, you could finish this thing if you turned up the jets. And MMA Factory guys, they just all kind of calm to a fault. I could see Cannonier maybe being the guy that pulls that out of Imavov, but considering that Cannonier at his worst doesn't throw enough volume and his fights kind of turn into single shot exchange stalemates, maybe he pulls the worst out of Imavov. But whether it ends up being a firefight or it's just a passing of the torch where Imavov lands 10 strikes around and Cannonier lands 7 and we're all snoozing by the end of it, I do think that youth takes over for age here. Imavov still really hasn't hit his peak. He's probably just kind of entering his prime as a top level middleweight, where Cannonier is holding on admirably to his gifts, but the other shoe's got to drop pretty soon. If we got the best version of Cannonier, if we got the version of him that beat Vettori, that whether you think he beat Strickland or not, did better against Strickland than almost everybody, that would be close to a pick'em for me, but I still might lean Imavov. And with the idea that, yeah, he's probably slipped just a little bit, it makes it easier to pick Imavov. I'm not really thinking we get a finish here. Not only has nobody finished Cannonier at middleweight, nobody's even really come close. Like, even the losses to Adesanya and Whitaker, like, they were competitive fights where Cannonier was never in serious trouble. I don't think Imavov's going to break that. It's not like Cannonier went and had his chin replaced. It was just his ACL. But give me Imavov to win a fight where it gets more convincing as we go along.
Think about the tech, not to get sidetracked, but think about the technology we are. And I agree with you. So I'm not like disputing you, be like, yeah, he just had his ACL replaced. Think about it. It wasn't that long ago. It was like ACL replaced, career over.
Oh, during our lifetime, like recently after we were watching the NFL, it was like, oh, ACL, he'll never be the same again.
Yeah,
like a receiver, running back, defensive back, they're done. Yeah,
it's just crazy. And now it's like no big deal.
Now it's like
nothing.
You do the arthroscopic thing where you don't even have a scar, you just have a couple little holes from where the fiber optic cable went. It's nuts. Yeah, that's how exciting this main event is likely to be, that we're like talking about advances in orthopedic surgery. That's it. That is the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 57, Cannonier versus Imavov. I have been Ben. He's been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. There's normally a lot more goofing around and joking and story time in these, but it's a 14 fight card. And frankly, a lot of it is not the highest stakes. So we did kind of punch through. But again, we think we bring as good a mixture of in-depth analysis and occasional asides as you'll find anywhere in this business. Please do like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you a thing. It makes our bosses happy. It keeps us bringing these shows to you for free. So do us the small favor. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment sections, and we'd love to hear your take on these fights. Whether you think we're out of our gourds on any of the upset picks or you think we're missing any of them, let us know, because if you're right and we're wrong, we will give you your flowers on the recap. That recap takes place right after the main event. It's on the Sherdog YouTube page, just right after Cannonier and Imavov finish their business. Keith will be taking the captain's chair. We will talk about all 14 of these fights in reverse order, from the headliner all the way down to that, frankly, kind of interesting opener, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We hope for Daniel Marcos' sake that it's not too much this time. And we'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And we'll talk with you, because the live chat is open that whole time. So we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights. We would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for listening, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. Make your bed of fairy tales while you're